Sometimes the hardest journey is the one that takes you back to where you started. Sometimes going home means walking straight into the life you spent 30 years trying to forget. Ray Carver was 58 years old when he finally stopped running. The gravel road into the Montana Hollow looked exactly the same as it had 3 decades ago. The same ruts carved by spring runoff, the same cottonwoods lining the creek bed, the same mountains rising sharp and blue against the western sky. Ray walked it the way he had as a young man, though his knees protested more now and the military ruck on his back felt heavier than it should. The canvas bag, worn smooth by years of use, held everything that mattered. A change of clothes, a wool blanket, a field manual from his time in Afghanistan, and 27 envelopes of seeds he had been saving for a decade. Each envelope was labeled in his careful handwriting: purple cabbage, lemon marigolds, bitter melon, Japanese eggplant, strange yellow gourds his mother had loved. He had carried these seeds through 3 deployments, 4 stateside moves, and more cheap apartments than he could remember, waiting for the day when he would have ground to plant them in, waiting for the day when he would be ready to come home. The hollow opened before him just past the lightning-struck oak. He stopped there, catching his breath, looking down at the land he had left behind. The Carver ranch sat in the clearing like a wound that had never healed. The main house was still standing, smoke rising from the stone chimney, but everything around it spoke of slow collapse. The barn leaned hard to the left. The fences sagged between rotting posts. The pastures had been grazed down to bare dirt and rocks. The creek that used to run silver through the meadow was just a muddy trickle now. He had been gone 30 years. 30 years since the argument with his mother. 30 years since his brother Hank told him to leave and never come back. 30 years since he had walked away from this place believing he would never see it again. But his mother was 12 years dead now, and he had nowhere else to go. Ray adjusted his ruck and started down the trail. Hank was splitting wood when Ray came into the clearing. His older brother had gone completely gray. His shoulders were thicker but stooped now, curved inward like a man who had carried too much for too long. He looked up at the sound of boots on gravel and his face went absolutely still. The axe stopped mid-swing. They stood looking at each other across the woodpile. 30 years compressed into a single moment of recognition. Hank's wife Bate appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. Her expression said everything: surprise, suspicion, something harder underneath that Ray recognized as fear. "What are you doing here?" Hank asked. His voice was rougher than Ray remembered, scarred by decades of cigarettes and dust. "I came home," Ray said. "Bit late for that." "I know." Bate came down the porch steps, her arms crossed tight against her chest. She had aged hard, her face lined and tired in a way that spoke of endless worry. "You cannot just show up after all this time and expect us to pretend like nothing happened." "I do not expect anything," Ray said quietly. "I just need a place to stay for a while. I will work. I will not be any trouble." Hank stuck the axe in the chopping block with a sound like a gunshot. "Mom is gone, if that is what you came for. Been gone 12 years now." The words hit like a fist to the stomach. Ray had known, of course. A cousin had tracked him down somehow, sent him a brief letter with the news, but hearing it from Hank's mouth made it real in a way that letter never had. "I know," he said. His throat was closing. "I got word." "She waited for you," Hank said. His voice was hard as iron. "Every single day she watched that road, waited for you to come back, waited for you to write, waited for you to call. She died waiting." Ray looked at the ground. There was nothing he could say to that. Nothing that would undo 3 decades of absence. Nothing that would give his mother back the son she had lost. Bate touched Hank's arm. "Let him sleep in the barn loft if he wants. But I am not feeding him, and I am not pretending we are one big happy family." Hank studied Ray for a long moment. His eyes were the same pale blue they had always been, but there was something broken in them now, something defeated. "Fine," he said. "Barn is open. Stay out of the house." He turned back to his wood. The conversation was over. Ray picked up his ruck and walked to the barn. Behind him he heard Bates' voice, low and angry, and Hank's rumbling response. He did not stop to listen. He pushed open the barn door and climbed the ladder to the loft. The space smelled like hay and old wood and 30 years of accumulated dust. Someone had stored boxes up here. Old furniture. Tools that did not work anymore. Pieces of a life that had kept going without him. Ray cleared a spot in the corner and laid out his blanket. Through the single window he could see the creek and the meadow beyond. The land looked exhausted. The fences needed mending. The meadow grass grew high and wild and useless. Whatever was happening here, the family was barely holding on. He unpacked his seeds and arranged them in a neat row against the wall. Tomorrow he would find a place to plant. That night, lying in the dark, he heard voices from the house. The walls were thin and sound carried clear across the clearing. He heard a young man arguing about money. He heard Bates' sharp corrections to someone younger, a grandchild maybe. He heard the creak of chairs, the clatter of dishes, the rhythms of a family living together in too small a space with too many burdens. He pulled the blanket up to his chin and closed his eyes. In the morning he woke to birds' song and distant voices. He climbed down from the loft and found a spot by the creek where he could wash his face in the cold water. The sun was just clearing the eastern ridge, painting the hollow gold. He walked the property, staying out of sight of the house. The ranch yard was cluttered with broken equipment, old tires, things that should have been hauled away years ago. The garden plot behind the house was overgrown with weeds 3 feet tall. Nobody had planted there in a long time. He followed the creek downstream until he found what he was looking for. A flat piece of ground near the water, out of direct sight of the house but not too far. The soil here was different, darker, richer. It would drain well but stay moist enough. He knelt and dug his fingers into the earth. It felt right. This was the place. Ray went back to the barn and found a rusted spade, a bent rake, and a coil of old wire. He spent the day clearing the ground, turning the soil, pulling rocks, marking out rows with stakes and string. His back ached and his hands blistered, but the work felt good. Honest. He had forgotten how much he needed this, how much he needed to put his hands in dirt and make something grow. By evening he had 6 rows staked out, each one 20 feet long. He stood back and looked at his work. It was not much, just turned earth and string. But it was a start. It was something. "What are you doing?" He turned. A boy stood at the edge of the clearing, maybe 10 years old, thin and freckled with dark hair that stuck up in the back. He watched Ray with curious eyes. "Planting a garden," Ray said. "Why?" "Because that is what I do." The boy came closer, looking at the rows. "Grandpa Hank says you are Uncle Ray, says you left before I was born." "That is right." "Why did you leave?" "That is a long story. Mama says you are strange, says we should not talk to you." Ray smiled a little. "Your mama might be right." The boy grinned. "I am Wyatt." "Nice to meet you, Wyatt." He squatted down and poked at the dirt with a stick. "What are you going to plant?" "All sorts of things. Vegetables, flowers, herbs." "Can I help?" "If your mama says it is okay." "She will not." He stood up, brushing off his hands. "But I will come back anyway." He ran off before Ray could say anything else. Ray worked until dark, then climbed back to the loft. Someone had left a plate of food at the bottom of the ladder. Cold beans, a piece of cornbread, an apple. He took it up to his space and ate slowly. It was not much, but it was something. A small crack in the wall. The next morning he began planting. He started with the purple cabbage, pressing each seed into the soil with his thumb, covering it gently, moving down the row with the precision he had learned in the military. Then the marigolds, the eggplants, the bitter melon. He planted the strange yellow gourds his mother had loved, the ones shaped like swan necks. He planted herbs he had learned about from an old farmer in Kentucky, sage and feverfew and something called devil's walking stick. He worked steadily, methodically. And as he worked, he talked to the seeds. It was something his mother had done, something he had laughed at as a boy. But somewhere during his deployments, during the long nights in Afghanistan when sleep would not come, he had started doing it too. A therapist at the VA had told him it was a grounding technique, a way to stay present, a way to quiet the noise in his head. So he talked to the seeds as he planted them, told them what they were, where they would grow, what he needed from them. By afternoon, all 6 rows were planted and watered. Ray sat back on his heels, exhausted and satisfied. He heard laughter from the direction of the house. Turning, he saw 3 people standing at the edge of the clearing. Bate, a young woman about 30, and a man around the same age. They were looking at his garden and laughing. "What is that supposed to be?" the young woman called. "Which lettuce?" the man said, loud enough for Ray to hear. "Just like Grandma used to plant." They laughed harder and walked away. Ray turned back to his rows. The words stung, but he had expected them. He had expected worse. He stood and brushed the dirt from his knees. The seeds were planted. Now came the hard part, waiting for them to grow, waiting for the family to see that he had not come back to cause trouble. He had come back to heal something that had been broken for too long. That evening, sitting in the loft with the last light fading, Ray pulled out a small photograph he had carried with him for 30 years. It was creased and faded, the colors washed out, but he could still make out the 2 figures. A young woman and a boy standing in a garden. The woman's hand rested on the boy's shoulder. Both were smiling. Ray touched his mother's face with one finger. "I am here, Mama," he whispered. "I am finally here." The garden grew faster than it should have. Within a week, green shoots pushed through the soil. Within 2 weeks, the rows were thick with seedlings. Ray watered them each morning and evening, pulling weeds, checking for pests, talking to them the way his mother had. The work kept him grounded, kept the nightmares at bay, kept him moving forward instead of backward. He was thinning the cabbage seedlings when he heard a sound behind him. He turned and saw Wyatt climbing down from the barn loft, a guilty look on his face. "What were you doing up there?" Ray asked. "Nothing." The boy came closer, his hands shoved in his pockets. "I was just looking around." "Find anything interesting?" "Lots of old junk." He paused. "And this?" He held out a small leather-bound book. The cover was worn smooth. The pages were swollen with age and moisture. Ray's breath caught in his chest. He took the book with careful hands, opening it slowly. The pages were covered in his mother's handwriting. Neat, precise lines of notes and dates and plant names. Observations about the weather. Sketches of leaf shapes and root systems. "Where did you find this?" Ray asked. His voice was barely a whisper. "In a box under some tarps. Is it important?" "Yes." Ray's eyes filled with tears. "It is very important." He sat down right there in the dirt, the book open in his lap. Wyatt sat beside him, watching as Ray turned the pages. His mother's voice came through in every line, the way she saw the world, the way she understood growing things. And there, tucked into the middle pages, were small envelopes, each one labeled with a year and a type of seed. She had saved these, Ray whispered, all these years. "Saved them for what?" "For me." Ray looked at the dates on the envelopes. The most recent was from 12 years ago, right before she died. She must have known I would come back eventually. Wyatt leaned closer. "What do they say?" Ray turned to a page near the end. His mother's handwriting was shakier here, as if written in illness or old age, but the words were clear. "For Ray when he comes home. Plant these with intention. Listen to what the ground needs. Remember what I taught you about speaking to growing things. They hear more than people think. Below that, in smaller writing, instructions. The purple cabbage beside the yellow gourds, the marigolds around everything, the eggplant in the shadiest row. Trust the old ways even when others mock you. The land remembers. Ray pressed his hand flat against the page. His mother had been planning for this, hoping for this. Even as the family had turned away from her practices, even as she had grown old and sick and alone, she had kept the faith that he would come home. "Are you okay?" Wyatt asked. "Yes," Ray said. "Better than okay. Thank you for finding this." "Is it really magic like Mama says?" "No, it is just knowing how things grow, understanding what they need from each other." "Then why does everyone act so weird about it?" Ray looked at the boy, his open, curious face, so much like his mother's. "Sometimes people are afraid of things they do not understand. Your great-grandmother understood plants in a way most people do not. She could look at a garden and know what it needed, like she could hear it talking to her. People thought that was strange." "Do you hear it too?" "Sometimes." Wyatt nodded slowly, like this made perfect sense. "Can you teach me?" "If you want to learn." "I do." They spent the afternoon going through the journal together. Ray showed Wyatt his mother's notes about companion planting, about moon phases and soil temperature, about the difference between feeding the plant and feeding the soil. The boy asked good questions, smart questions. Ray found himself telling stories about his childhood, about working in the garden with his mother, about the things they had grown together. He was so absorbed in the journal that he did not hear Hank approaching until his brother was standing right over them. "What are you doing?" Hank asked. His face was tight with anger. "Just reading Mama's old journal," Ray said. "Where did you get that?" "I found it," Wyatt said quickly, "in the barn." Hank's jaw worked. "Give it here." Ray stood slowly, holding the journal against his chest. "It is family property. Mama left it for me." "She did not leave you anything. You were not here." The words hung in the air between them. Wyatt looked from his grandfather to his uncle, confusion and worry on his young face. "I wrote to her," Ray said quietly, "every month for the first 5 years. Did she get those letters?" Hank's face darkened. "I do not know what you're talking about." "I think you do." Hank stepped closer. "You left. You walked away from this family, from this place, from her. You do not get to come back now and pretend like it was anybody's fault but your own." "I left because you told me to," Ray said. His voice was steady but his hands were shaking. "I left because you said I was filling Mama's head with nonsense, that I was making her worse. You said this place would be better off without me. Remember? You were encouraging her craziness. I was learning from her." "Same thing." Hank reached for the journal but Ray stepped back. "Do not stir up that old nonsense again," Hank said. "It nearly broke this family once. Mama spent her last years alone because people thought she was touched in the head, and you helped put that idea in their minds. That is not true." "Is it not?" Hank's voice rose. "You want to plant your weird garden, fine, but do not go dragging the boy into it. Do not go filling his head with the same crazy ideas. They are not crazy ideas. They are just knowledge." "I do not want to hear it." Hank grabbed Wyatt's arm. "Come on, son. Your mother is looking for you." "I want to stay with Uncle Ray." "Now." The boy looked at Ray helplessly, then let his grandfather lead him away. At the edge of the clearing, Hank turned back. "Stay away from him, Ray, and stay away from the family. You are only here because I am allowing it. That can change any time." He walked away, Wyatt trailing behind him. Ray stood alone in the garden, the journal clutched in his hands, his heart pounding. The confrontation had shaken him more than he wanted to admit. But beneath the hurt and anger, something else was growing. Determination. His mother had believed he would come back, had waited for him, had prepared this gift. Hank could threaten all he wanted. Ray was not leaving, not until he had done what he came here to do. That evening, Ray sat in the loft and read the journal from beginning to end. It was more than just planting notes. It was a record of his mother's life, her thoughts, her loneliness. There were entries about the family's judgment, about neighbors who stopped visiting, about the isolation that had grown as her practices became more known. There were also entries about Ray, hopes that he was well, prayers for his safety, regrets about the argument that had driven him away. And on the last page, dated 2 weeks before she died, a final entry. I have kept the seeds for him. I have written down everything I know. If he comes back, when he comes back, he will have what he needs to start again. The land will help him. It helped me even when nobody else would. Tell him I forgive him. Tell him I never stopped loving him. Tell him the garden remembers. Ray pressed the journal to his chest and wept. For his mother, for the lost years, for the misunderstanding that had kept them apart. When the tears finally stopped, he felt hollow and exhausted, but also strangely clear. He knew what he had to do. He would plant the garden according to her instructions. He would tend it faithfully, and he would prove, if only to himself, that his mother's knowledge had been real and valuable and worth preserving. The mockery would continue, the family would resist, but the garden would grow, and maybe in time the wounds would heal too. Ray rose before dawn every morning to tend the garden. He followed his mother's instructions precisely. Purple cabbage beside yellow gourds, marigolds planted in circles around the other vegetables, eggplants in the shadiest row. The combination seemed random, even wrong, but he trusted the journal. The garden responded. Within 3 weeks, the plants were thriving in ways that defied his experience. The cabbage heads swelled purple and tight. The marigolds bloomed in brilliant gold clusters. The eggplants hung dark and heavy from their stems. The strange yellow gourds twisted into shapes like question marks and swan necks. He noticed other things too. The soil around the marigolds stayed looser, easier to work. The cabbage never showed signs of aphids or caterpillars. The eggplants seemed to produce more in the shade than they should have. It was as if the plants were working together, supporting each other in ways he could not quite explain. Every morning he found Wyatt watching from a distance. The boy never came close. Hank's orders were clear, but he watched. Sometimes Ray would wave and Wyatt would wave back before running off. On a Tuesday morning, Ray found something hanging above the barn door. A braided rope of dried herbs, weathered and brittle with age. He recognized his mother's work immediately. Sage, feverfew, something else he could not identify. It must have been hanging there for years, forgotten by everyone but enduring through seasons and weather. He left it where it was. A small protection, his mother might have said. A blessing. Ray did not care which. It felt like a sign that he was on the right path. The family kept their distance. Bate glared at him when they passed in the yard. The young man Ray had seen, Travis he learned was Hank's son, made a point of laughing loudly whenever he saw the garden. His wife shook her head and muttered to the other women. Only the youngest children showed curiosity, and they were quickly pulled away. But Ray noticed something happening. Neighbors started walking past more often, slowing down, stopping to look. A few ventured closer, asking questions about what he was growing. Ray answered politely, offering cuttings and seeds to anyone who asked. One woman accepted a handful of marigold seeds and thanked him shyly. "My grandmother used to grow these," she said. "I had forgotten how beautiful they were." Another man asked about the purple cabbage. "Never seen one that color before." "Try it," Ray said, cutting him ahead. "Make slaw with it." The man returned 2 days later to tell him it was the best cabbage he had ever tasted. He asked for seeds. Ray gave them freely. Slowly, word spread through the small community. The strange garden by the creek was producing something remarkable. People who had never met Ray started showing up, curious, cautious, but drawn by the beauty and abundance of what he had grown. Ray shared everything: seeds, cuttings, vegetables, advice. He remembered his mother's philosophy. The garden was meant to give, not to hoard. The more you shared, the more came back. But the family still kept their distance. Hank watched from afar but never approached. Bate avoided looking at the garden entirely. Travis's hostility only seemed to grow as the garden thrived. Only Wyatt still tried to visit, sneaking over when he thought no one was watching. Ray always sent him back quickly, not wanting to cause more trouble. But the boy's visits meant everything. One morning, Wyatt brought him a drawing he had made. The garden in colored pencil, every row carefully detailed. At the top he had written, "Uncle Ray's Garden." "It is not magic," Ray said gently. But he kept the drawing, tucking it carefully into his mother's journal where it would stay safe. "Feels like magic to me," Wyatt said, and ran off before Ray could argue. Ray stood in the garden that afternoon, surrounded by abundance, and felt the ache of isolation. The land was healing. The plants were thriving, but the wounds in the family ran deeper than any remedy could reach. He wondered if his mother had felt this way, surrounded by beauty, by growth, by evidence of her gift, but still alone. He was weeding the eggplant row when he heard Hank coughing. The sound came from near the barn, deep and wet and violent. Ray looked up and saw his brother bent double, one hand braced against a fence post. The coughing went on, shaking Hank's whole body. When it finally stopped, Hank stayed bent over, struggling to catch his breath. Ray started toward him but stopped. Hank would not want his help, would not accept it. So Ray stood in the garden and watched his brother straighten slowly, wipe his mouth with a bandana, and walk unsteadily back toward the house. The bandana came away spotted with blood. That night Ray lay in the loft listening to Hank cough. The sound carried clear across the clearing, cutting through the darkness. Deep rattling coughs that went on for minutes at a time. The sound of something seriously wrong. In the morning Ray found Wyatt waiting by the garden, his face tight with worry. "He is worse," the boy said without greeting. "Mama is scared, but she will not say it." "Has he seen a doctor yet?" "No, he says we cannot afford the bills." Wyatt's eyes were red-rimmed. "Is he going to die?" "No," Ray said firmly, though he could not know that. "But he needs help." "Can you help him?" Ray looked at the boy's desperate face and felt something break open inside him. Hank had forbidden him from interfering. The family had made it clear he was not wanted. But this was bigger than old grudges and wounded pride. "I can try," he said, "but your grandfather might not want my help." "He needs it, though." "Yes, he does." Ray spent the afternoon preparing a remedy. He harvested feverfew from the garden along with sage leaves and a handful of mint. From his mother's journal he found the exact proportions: 2 parts feverfew to 1 part sage, a touch of mint for flavor. Steep in boiling water for exactly 7 minutes. He worked in the barn, using an old pot he had found and water from the creek. The smell was sharp and medicinal but not unpleasant. When it was ready, he poured it into a mason jar and sealed it tight. That evening, just after sunset, he walked to the house and set the jar on the porch railing with a note: "For the cough, drink it warm 3 times a day. R." Then he walked away quickly, before anyone could see him. The next morning the jar was gone. Ray did not know if Hank had taken it or if someone had thrown it away. He went about his work trying not to think about it, trying not to listen too hard for the sound of coughing. 3 days passed. The coughing continued, but it sounded different, less violent, less frequent. On the 4th morning Ray saw Hank working near the woodpile, moving with more ease than he had in weeks. Ray allowed himself a small hope. That afternoon, Wyatt appeared at the garden with a canvas bag slung over his shoulder. "I brought tools," he announced, "a trowel and some gloves. Mama does not know I took them." "Wyatt, you are going to get in trouble." "I do not care." He set the bag down and looked at Ray with fierce determination. "Grandpa is better. I know you helped him even if nobody else will say it, so I am going to help you." Ray's throat tightened. "Your family does not want you here." "They do not want a lot of things. Does not mean they are right." Ray could not argue with that. He handed the boy a trowel. "All right, we need to weed the far row." They worked together for an hour, talking quietly. Wyatt told him about school, about his friends, about how his parents fought over money late at night when they thought he was asleep. He told Ray that his father was worried about losing the property, that there were debts nobody talked about. "Grandpa will not sell," Wyatt said, pulling up a stubborn thistle. "But Dad says if we do not find money somewhere, the bank is going to take it anyway." Ray listened, piecing together the family's situation. It was worse than he had thought. No wonder Bate was so hostile. No wonder Travis was desperate. No wonder Hank looked so defeated. "Is that why everyone is so mad at you?" Wyatt asked. "Because they think you want the land?" "Maybe, or maybe they are just mad I left in the first place." "Why did you leave?" Ray sat back, considering how much to tell a 10-year-old boy. "Your grandfather and I disagreed about a lot of things, about your great-grandmother mostly, about the way she lived. He thought she was strange, that her gardening and her remedies were foolish. I thought she was wise." "What did Grandma think?" "She thought she understood things other people did not. She thought she could hear what the land needed, what the plants needed. Your grandfather called that nonsense." "But it is not nonsense. I have seen your garden. Things grow here that should not." "Maybe they grow because I pay attention. Maybe that is all it is." Wyatt shook his head. "It is more than that. Grandpa's cough. That tea you made. It worked. Mama will not admit it, but I heard her tell Dad it was like magic." "It was not magic. It was just the right plants at the right time." Before Ray could answer, Bates' voice cut across the clearing. "Wyatt, get away from there." The boy jumped to his feet. Bate was striding toward them, her face furious. "I told you to stay away from her," she said, grabbing Wyatt's arm. "I was just helping." "I do not care what you were doing. Get back to the house." "But Mama." "Now." Wyatt looked at Ray helplessly, then ran toward the cabin. Bate turned on Ray, her eyes blazing. "Leave him alone." "He came to me," Ray said quietly. "I did not ask him to." "I do not care. You stay away from my son." "Bate, please." Bates' voice cracked. "Do not act like you understand what we are going through. You left. You were not here when things got hard. You do not get to waltz back in and play the hero." "I am not trying to be a hero. I am just trying to help." "We do not need your help. We do not need your weird garden or your folk remedies or whatever else you are planning. Just stay away from us." She walked away before Ray could respond, her shoulders rigid with anger and fear. Ray stood alone in the garden, his hands trembling. He wanted to shout after Bate, to defend himself, to explain. But what good would it do? She was not wrong. He had left. He had not been here when things got hard. He could not undo that. That night, lying in the loft, Ray heard Bate crying. The sound carried across the clearing, raw and broken. He heard Hank's low voice trying to comfort his wife. He heard the murmur of their conversation, too quiet to make out words, but the emotion was clear. Fear, exhaustion, desperation. Ray pulled his blanket over his head, trying to block it out, but the sound stayed with him. In the morning, he found an old woman standing at the edge of the garden. She was small and bent, her white hair pulled back in a loose bun. She wore a faded dress and carried a cloth bag. "You are Ray," she said. It was not a question. "Yes, I am Mrs. Sullivan. I live down the road." She stepped closer, examining the rows of vegetables with sharp eyes. "I knew your mother." Ray's breath caught. "You did?" "For 40 years. She was my friend." Mrs. Sullivan bent to touch a marigold, her fingers gentle. "People said cruel things about her, said she was touched. I never believed it." "Thank you for that." "Your mother understood plants, really understood them. Not just how to grow them, but what they needed, what they could give back." She straightened slowly, wincing. "I see you have got the same gift." "I do not know if it is a gift." "It is. Do not let anyone tell you different." Mrs. Sullivan opened her bag and pulled out a bundle of cuttings wrapped in damp newspaper. "I brought you these. Cuttings from plants your mother gave me years ago. Thought you might like to have them." Ray took the bundle with trembling hands. Thank you so much." "Your mother would be proud of what you are doing here. Do not let the family's fear stop you." Mrs. Sullivan patted Ray's arm. "Fear makes people cruel, but it does not last forever." She walked away slowly, leaning on her cane. Ray watched her go, then unwrapped the cuttings carefully. Inside were slips of rosemary and thyme and something with silvery leaves he did not recognize. Each one had been tended with care, kept alive all these years. He planted them immediately, giving them the best spots in the garden. As he worked, he felt his mother's presence more strongly than ever. In the cuttings, in the journal, in the land itself. He was not alone in this. He never had been. Over the next week, the garden continued to thrive. The cabbage heads grew to the size of basketballs. The eggplants hung so heavy the plants needed staking. The marigolds bloomed in waves of gold and orange, and the strange yellow gourds twisted into shapes that caught the light and seemed to glow. Neighbors began to stop and stare. A few ventured closer, asking questions. Ray answered politely, offering cuttings and seeds to anyone who asked. One woman accepted a handful of marigold seeds and thanked him quietly. "My grandmother used to grow these," she said. "I had forgotten how beautiful they were." Another man asked about the purple cabbage. Ray cut him a head. "Try it," he said. The man returned 2 days later to say it was the best cabbage he had ever tasted. He asked for seeds. Slowly, word spread. The strange garden by the creek was producing something remarkable. People who had never met Ray started showing up, curious, cautious, but drawn by what he had grown. Ray shared everything freely. Seeds, cuttings, vegetables, advice. He remembered his mother's philosophy. The garden was meant to give. But the family still kept their distance. Hank watched from afar but never approached. Bate avoided the garden entirely. Travis's hostility seemed to grow as the garden thrived. Only Wyatt still tried to visit, sneaking over when he thought no one was watching. One morning, Ray was working in the garden when Hank appeared. His brother stood at the edge of the rows, not speaking. Ray straightened, waiting. Hank looked older in the morning light, thinner. The cough had left its mark on him. "The tea worked," Hank said finally. His voice was rough. "I do not know how, but it worked." "I am glad." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Hank said, "There is something you need to know." He turned and walked back toward the barn. Ray followed. In the barn, Hank climbed into the loft and Ray climbed after him. Hank went to a corner and pulled aside some tarps. Underneath was a metal box, rusted at the edges. Hank opened it. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to Ruth Carver in Ray's handwriting, all stamped and sealed. Ray's hand started shaking as he reached for them. He pulled one out. The postmark said June 1994, 6 months after he had left. He pulled out another. March 1996. Another. December 1998. There were 52 letters in total, every one of them unopened, every one of them marked return to sender, but they had never been returned. They had been hidden here. Ray looked at his brother. You told me you sent them back. Hank's face was gray. I could not. You told me Mama knew. I tried to reach out. I lied. Ray felt the floor dropping out from under him. She died thinking I did not care, thinking I abandoned her completely. Hank looked at the floor. Every time you wrote it tore her up, made her hope you would come back. I thought if the letters stopped she could finally move on, so I kept them. I told her you had moved on, started a new life, did not want anything to do with us. Ray's vision was blurring. My God, Hank, what did you do? I know what I did. Hank's voice cracked. I have known for 12 years. When she died, she said, his voice broke completely. She said to tell you she understood, that she did not blame you, that she loved you anyway. Ray sank onto the floor of the loft, his legs giving out. His mother had died forgiving him for an abandonment that was never real, had died believing her son did not want her, all because of these letters, all because Hank had decided what was best. I thought you would come back, Hank said. After she died, I thought you would come for the funeral and I could explain, but you did not come. I did not know she had died until 3 weeks later. A cousin finally tracked me down. Hank's face crumpled. Oh God. They sat in silence, the weight of 30 years crushing down on them both. Ray wanted to hate his brother. Part of him did, but he could also see the fear in Hank's face, the guilt he had been carrying, the terrible logic that had seemed right at the time. I cannot forgive you, Ray said finally. Not yet. I know. But I understand why you did it. That is something at least. Hank nodded, wiping his face with a rough hand. The garden, the way you have been helping people, the way you have been here even when we have been cruel, that is more than I deserve. It is not about what you deserve. It is about what Mama wanted. What did she want? Ray pulled out his mother's journal and opened it to the last page. He read aloud. Tell him I forgive him. Tell him I never stopped loving him. Tell him the garden remembers. Hank broke down completely then, his shoulders shaking with sobs. Ray sat beside him, not touching, not comforting, but present, bearing witness to his brother's grief and regret. When Hank finally composed himself, he said, I do not know how to make this right. You cannot, but you can stop making it worse. How? Let me stay. Let me tend the garden. Let Wyatt learn from me. Stop fighting what Mama tried to build here. Hank was quiet for a long time. Then he said, there is something else you need to know. He reached back into the box and pulled out papers, legal documents yellowed with age. Ray took them with trembling hands. It was a will, his mother's will, dated 2 weeks before she died. To Ray, I leave the South Creek pasture and dry hollow. To Hank, I leave the main ranch, house, and northern grazing land. Ray stared at the document. You never filed this. I could not face trying to contact you, not after what I had done. So I just, Hank gestured helplessly, pretended it did not exist. The land stayed in my name. Ray looked at the will, at his mother's signature, at the date, 2 weeks before she died. She had been making sure he would have something to come back to, even knowing she might never see him again. You could take it right now, Hank said. You could take what is yours and force us to partition the property. We are so deep in debt we would have no choice but to sell. Ray looked at the land description. The South Creek pasture and dry hollow, 40 acres of rocky ground, the exact land where his garden was growing, the land everyone thought was worthless. He folded the will carefully and handed it back to Hank. I need to think about this. That evening Ray sat in the loft with the 52 letters spread around him. He opened them one by one, reading what he had written 30 years ago, apologies, updates about his life, hopes for reconciliation. Each letter a bridge his mother never got to cross. He read until he could not see through the tears anymore. Then he gathered them carefully and put them in his mother's journal, evidence of love that had been lost, evidence of hope that had been stolen, but also evidence that he had tried, that he had cared, that the silence had not been his choice. It did not undo the years, it did not bring his mother back, but it meant something. It had to mean something. Ray lay down and looked at the ceiling of the barn. Tomorrow he would have to decide what to do about the land, about his inheritance, about his place in this family. But tonight he just let himself feel the weight of it all. The grief, the anger, the strange, painful relief of finally knowing the truth. Outside, the garden grew in the darkness, the plants his mother had dreamed of, the seeds she had saved, the hope she had never stopped planting, even when everyone told her it was foolish, even when she was alone, even when her son was gone and never coming back. The land remembers, she had written, and lying there in the barn where he had played as a child, Ray finally understood what she meant. The land remembered every seed planted, every choice made, every act of faith in the future. It remembered and it gave back what you gave it. He had planted regret here for 30 years. The land had given him back isolation and grief. But now he was planting something different. Hope, connection, beauty. And the land was starting to give that back too, in green shoots and purple cabbage and twisted gourds, in Wyatt's curiosity and Mrs. Sullivan's kindness and neighbors who stopped to ask questions. The garden was growing, and maybe, just maybe, so was the family. Ray closed his eyes and let sleep take him. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. But tonight, for the first time in 30 years, he was home. The drought came early that year, and it came hard. By late June, the creek had shrunk to a trickle of muddy water that barely wet the stones. The pastures turned brown and brittle. Neighboring ranches watched their wells run dry and their livestock lose weight on grass that crumbled to dust. The Montana sky stretched blue and cloudless, day after endless day, while the land baked and cracked beneath it. But Ray's garden thrived. It should not have been possible. Everyone said so. 6 rows of vegetables growing lush and green while everything around them withered. Purple cabbage heads swelling tight and heavy. Eggplants hanging dark as bruises from stems that should have been stressed and stunted. Marigolds blooming in waves of gold and orange, their scent heavy in the dry air. And the gourds, those strange yellow gourds his mother had loved, twisting into impossible shapes that caught the morning light and seemed to glow. Ray worked the garden at dawn and dusk when the heat was bearable. He had rigged a drip irrigation system from salvaged materials, using the last trickle of creek water with a precision he had learned in Afghanistan. Every drop counted. Every drop had a purpose. He mulched heavily, keeping the soil covered and cool. He planted in the exact combinations his mother's journal prescribed. Purple cabbage beside yellow gourds, marigolds in circles around everything else. Eggplants in the shadiest spots. And he talked to the plants, always talking, a habit from his therapy at the VA, a grounding technique they had called it, a way to stay present, to quiet the noise in his head. But it was more than that now. As he whispered to the cabbage about the heat, as he murmured to the eggplants about their progress, he heard his mother's voice underneath his own, felt her hands guiding his, understood finally what she had been trying to teach him all those years ago. The plants were not just surviving, they were thriving, producing 2, sometimes 3 times what they should. The cabbage heads grew to the size of basketballs. The eggplants needed staking, they hung so heavy. And the soil itself seemed different, richer, darker, as if the garden was creating its own ecosystem, independent of the drought ravaging everything around it. People noticed. Old ranchers would slow their trucks on the road, staring at the impossible green. Neighbors who had never spoken to Ray before started walking past more often, finding excuses to stop and look. A few ventured closer, asking careful questions. What was he growing? How was it surviving? Could he spare any seeds? Ray shared everything. He gave away cabbage and eggplant and armfuls of marigolds. He offered cuttings and seeds to anyone who asked. He explained companion planting and mulching and water conservation in the simple, direct language he had learned in the military. No mysticism, no folk magic, just observation, attention, understanding what the plants needed from each other. An elderly woman named Mrs. Sullivan became a regular visitor. She had known his mother for 40 years, she said, had learned from her, had grieved when Ruth Carver died alone and half forgotten by the community that had once sought her advice. She brought cuttings from plants Ruth had given her decades ago, rosemary and thyme and strange herbs with silvery leaves. Ray planted them with reverence, giving them the best spots in the garden. "Your mother would be proud," Mrs. Sullivan said one morning, watching Ray work. "This is exactly what she hoped for." Ray did not answer, could not answer. His throat was too tight. But he nodded and the old woman patted his shoulder, and that was enough. Word spread through the small community. The soldier who had come home after 30 years, the garden that should not be possible, the man who shared everything he grew and asked nothing in return. People started bringing him things, an old wheelbarrow that still worked, hand tools their grandfathers had used, bags of aged manure from horses and cattle. They did not say much. Montana ranchers were not big talkers, but the gifts said what words could not. "You are one of us. You belong here. Welcome home." But the family kept their distance. Hank watched from afar, his face unreadable. The cough had improved since Ray's tea, but he was still weak, still moving like a man who had been sick too long. Bate avoided looking at the garden entirely, her jaw tight whenever she had to walk past. And Travis, Hank's son, seemed to grow more hostile with each passing day. Ray would see him standing at the edge of the clearing, arms crossed, watching the garden with something that looked like hatred. Only Wyatt still came. The boy was 10 years old, thin and serious with his great-grandmother's eyes. He would slip away from the ranch house in the early mornings and find Ray already working. Ray never asked him to come, never encouraged it, but he never sent him away either. They worked side by side in comfortable silence, the boy learning by watching, asking good questions when he had them. Ray taught him the way his mother had taught him, not through lectures but through doing. How to tell if soil needed water by the weight of it in your hand. How to identify beneficial insects from pests. How to pinch back tomato suckers for better fruit. How companion plants protected each other, the marigolds repelling aphids, the cabbage shading the soil for the eggplants. "Why do you talk to them?" Wyatt asked one morning. "The plants." Ray considered the question. "Because it helps me pay attention. When I talk to a plant, I notice things. If it is drooping, if the leaves are the wrong color, if something is eating it." "Grandma used to do that too, right?" "Yes. Dad says it made people think she was crazy." "What do you think?" The boy was quiet for a moment, pulling weeds with careful fingers. "I think people call things crazy when they do not understand them." "That is wise," Ray said. "Dad says you are filling my head with nonsense." "Am I?" Number Wyatt looked up, his young face serious. "You are just teaching me about plants. That is not nonsense. That is just knowing stuff." A door slammed at the ranch house. They both turned to see Travis striding toward them, his face dark with anger. "Wyatt, get over here. Now." The boy's shoulders sagged. "I have to go." "I know. I am sorry." "Do not be sorry. You did not do anything wrong." Wyatt ran back toward the house. Ray watched Travis grab the boy's arm, rougher than necessary, and drag him inside. The look Travis threw back at Ray was pure hostility. Ray turned back to the garden, trying to ignore the sick feeling in his stomach. He was making things worse for the boy. Maybe Hank was right. Maybe he should keep to himself. But when he looked at the thriving plants, at the impossible abundance in the middle of drought, at the way the garden seemed to pulse with life, he could not bring himself to stop. This was what his mother had wanted. This was what he had come here to do. That afternoon Travis appeared at the edge of the garden. He stood there for a long moment, not speaking, just staring at the rows of vegetables with something like disbelief on his face. Ray straightened from his weeding, waiting. "How are you doing this?" Travis said finally. His voice was flat, hostile. "Doing what?" "This." Travis gestured at the garden. "Everything. How is anything growing? We have not had rain in 6 weeks. The well at the Johnson place ran dry yesterday, but your garden looks like it is being watered every damn day." "I use the creek, very carefully, drip irrigation, mulch to keep moisture in." "That is not enough. Nothing should be growing like this." "Companion planting helps. The marigolds keep pests away. The different plants support each other." Travis laughed, harsh and bitter. "Support each other? Jesus. You sound just like her, just like Grandma with all her folk magic nonsense." "It is not magic, it is agriculture." "Yeah, sure." Travis moved closer, his jaw tight. "Let me tell you what it looks like from where I am standing. It looks like you showed up out of nowhere after 30 years. Started playing farmer on land that is not yours. And somehow, magically, everything you touch turns to gold while the rest of us are drowning. I am just growing vegetables. You are making us look like fools. Dad worked this land for 40 years, broke his back trying to keep this place running, and he could never make it produce like this. None of us could. But you, the prodigal son who abandoned his family, you come back and within weeks you have got the whole county talking about your miracle garden." Ray kept his voice calm. "I did not come back to make anyone look foolish." "Then why did you come back?" "Because I had nowhere else to go." The honesty of it seemed to hit Travis like a slap. He stepped back, his face twisting. "Yeah, well, maybe you should have stayed gone, would have been easier on everyone." He turned and walked away before Ray could respond. Ray stood in the garden, his hands shaking. He understood Travis's anger, understood the resentment. A son watching his father fail, watching the ranch slide toward ruin. And then this stranger appears, this uncle he barely knows, and succeeds at everything with seemingly no effort. Of course Travis hated him. Ray would have hated him too. But it was not magic and it was not easy. Every morning Ray woke at 4:30 and worked until the heat drove him to shade. Every evening he worked until dark. His back ached constantly. His hands were scarred from thorns and tools. He fell asleep each night too exhausted to dream. The garden thrived because he gave it everything he had, because he paid attention, because he remembered what his mother had taught him about listening to the land. That evening, sitting in the barn loft with his mother's journal, Ray found an entry he had missed before. It was dated 3 months before she died. Her handwriting was shaky but clear. "They think I am crazy because I talk to plants, because I see connections they do not, because I understand that everything in a garden is related, that you cannot pull one thread without affecting the whole tapestry. But I am not crazy. I am just paying attention. The land speaks if you learn its language. The plants tell you what they need if you listen. This is not magic. This is just being present, being aware, being willing to see what is actually there instead of what you expect to see." Ray pressed his hand to the page. His mother had known, had understood what people would say about her, had chosen to keep going anyway, had kept planting, kept teaching, kept believing that someone would listen, that someone would learn, that the knowledge would not die with her. And here he was, the son who had left, the son who had abandoned her, learning her lessons 30 years too late. The next morning Ray found Wyatt waiting by the garden with a canvas bag slung over his shoulder. "I brought tools," the boy announced. "A trowel and some gloves. Mama does not know I took them." "Wyatt, you are going to get in trouble." "I do not care." He set the bag down and looked at Ray with fierce determination. "Grandpa is better. I know you helped him even if nobody will say it. So I am going to help you. Your family does not want you here. They do not want a lot of things. Does not mean they are right." They worked together that morning, weeding and watering and checking for pests. Wyatt told him about school, about his friends, about how his parents fought over money late at night when they thought he was asleep, about how his father was worried about losing the ranch, about debts nobody talked about. "Grandpa will not sell," Wyatt said, pulling up a stubborn thistle. "But Dad says if we do not find money somewhere, the bank is going to take it anyway." Ray listened, piecing together a picture he had been trying not to see. The ranch was not just struggling. It was dying. The family was not just hostile. They were terrified. Everything they had was slipping away and they could not stop it. And here was Ray growing abundance in the middle of their scarcity, a living reminder of their failure. "Is that why everyone is so mad at you?" Wyatt asked. "Because they think you want the land?" "Maybe, or maybe they are just mad I left in the first place." "Why did you leave?" Ray sat back on his heels. "Your grandfather and I disagreed about a lot of things, about your great-grandmother mostly, about the way she lived. He thought she was strange, that her gardening and her remedies were foolish. I thought she was wise. We fought about it, a lot. And finally he told me to choose, his way or the highway, so I chose the highway." "Do you regret it?" "Every day." "Then why did you stay gone so long?" "Because I was stubborn and proud and hurt, and because I thought if I came back I would have to admit I was wrong." Ray looked at the boy. "Turns out I was wrong about a lot of things, but I was not wrong about your great-grandmother. She understood something real, something important, and I threw it away because I was too young and too stupid to see it." "You are here now, though." "Yeah, I am here now." They worked in silence for a while. Then Wyatt said, "I found something else. In the barn, want to see it?" He led Ray to the loft and pulled aside some tarps in the corner. Underneath was a box, old and battered. Wyatt opened it carefully. Inside were more envelopes, smaller than the letters, each one labeled with a year and a plant name. Ray's hands trembled as he picked one up. The envelope was made from old newspaper, folded and sealed with wax. The label said 1983, Purple Cabbage, Ruth Carver. "She saved seeds," Wyatt said. "Lots of them, for years and years. I think she was saving them for you." Ray opened the envelope carefully. Inside were seeds, dark and small, perfectly preserved. He opened another. Yellow gourd, 1989. Another. Marigold, 1995. There were dozens of envelopes spanning decades. His mother had been collecting seeds his entire life, saving them, preserving them, waiting for the day when he would come back and need them. Ray sat down on the floor of the loft, surrounded by his mother's seeds, and felt something break open in his chest. She had never given up, never stopped hoping, never stopped preparing for his return, even when years passed with no word, even when Hank told her Ray had moved on, even as she got older and sicker and more alone. She had kept saving seeds, kept writing in her journal, kept believing. "Are you okay?" Wyatt asked. "Yeah," Ray wiped his eyes roughly. "Better than okay. This is a gift, a real gift." "What are you going to plant them?" "Some of them," Ray looked at the dates. "Some of these are 30, 40 years old. They might not germinate, but we will try." That is what she would have wanted, to keep trying. They spent the rest of the morning going through the seed box. Each envelope was a memory, a connection to the past. evidence of love that had endured across decades and distance and misunderstanding. Ray selected a few envelopes from different years and brought them down to the garden. He and Wyatt planted them carefully, marking each spot with a stake and the year the seeds had been saved. As they worked, Ray told stories about his mother, about the garden she had kept when he was young, about the way she could look at a plant and know what it needed, about the remedies she made for neighbors, the way people would come to her when they were sick or hurt or worried, about how the community had slowly turned away from her as she got older, how they started calling her strange, touched, crazy. Why did they do that? Wyatt asked. Because they did not understand, and people fear what they do not understand. But she was just helping them. Yeah, she was, but helping people in ways they do not expect, in ways that seem too easy or too strange, that scares them. They would rather suffer with what they know than risk something different. That is stupid. Ray smiled. Yeah, it is, but it is also human. They were planting the last envelope when Bate appeared at the edge of the garden. Her face was pale and tight. Wyatt, she said, come here. Now. The boy looked at Ray, then back at his mother. But Mama, I am helping. I said now. Bate's voice cracked and Wyatt jumped up and ran to her. She grabbed his hand and pulled him away. But before she left, she looked back at Ray and he saw something in her face that was not just anger. It was fear, raw and desperate fear. That night Ray heard voices from the ranch house, loud voices, Travis and his wife arguing, Hank's deeper rumble trying to calm them down, Bate crying. The sounds carried clear across the clearing in the dry air. Ray tried not to listen, but it was impossible. The family was fracturing. The pressure was breaking them apart, and his presence, his garden, was making it worse. In the morning, Bate was waiting by the barn. She stood with her arms crossed, her face drawn and exhausted. We need to talk, she said. Okay. You need to stop. Stop what? All of it, the garden, the teaching, getting close to Wyatt, all of it. Bate. She held up a hand. Let me finish. I know you think you are helping. I know you think you are honoring your mother or making amends or whatever, but you are not. You are making everything harder. Travis is barely holding on. This ranch is dying. Hank is sick. We are drowning in debt we cannot pay. And every day you are out here with your perfect garden, showing everyone how easy it is, how simple if you just know the right tricks. Do you have any idea what that does to my husband, to my family? I am not trying to make anyone feel bad. But you are, Bates' voice rose, every cabbage you grow, every seed you share, every neighbor who stops by to see your miracle garden. It is all just proof that we failed, that we are not enough, that we never were. That is not true. Is it not? She gestured toward the ranch house. Hank worked this land for 40 years, put everything he had into it, and it is still not enough. The bank is going to take it. Do you understand that? In 90 days we lose everything, and there is nothing we can do about it. Ray felt like he had been punched. I did not know it was that bad. Well, now you do. So please, just stop. Pack up your seeds and your journal and go back to wherever you came from. Let us fall apart in private without an audience. She turned and walked away before Ray could respond, her shoulders shaking. Ray stood in the garden, the morning sun hot on his neck, and felt the weight of what he had done. He had been so focused on the garden, on honoring his mother, on finding a place to belong, that he had not seen what it was costing the family, had not understood that his success was their failure, that every thriving plant was a reminder of what they could not do. But leaving would not save them. Leaving would just be running again, and he was done running. Ray spent that day thinking, walking the property, looking at the land with new eyes. The ranch was bigger than he had realized. 200 acres at least, stretching from the creek up into the foothills, but most of it was unusable. Rocky pasture, scrub brush. The kind of land that looked impressive on a map but would not support cattle or crops. The only good ground was the creek bottom, maybe 60 acres total, and most of that was overgrazed and depleted. He walked to the county recorder's office in town that afternoon, looked up the property records. The Carver ranch had been in the family for 3 generations. His grandfather had homesteaded it in 1947, built the original cabin that still stood. His father had expanded it, adding the barn and the northern pasture. And Hank had held on to it, through droughts and bad markets and everything else Montana could throw at a small rancher. But the records showed something else too: liens, mortgages, second mortgages, loans against future cattle sales. The ranch was leveraged to the breaking point, $280,000 in debt, more than the land was worth in this market. Bate was right. The bank was going to take it. There was no way out. Ray was walking back to his truck when he saw Hank sitting on a bench outside the feed store. His brother looked old in the afternoon light, worn down, defeated. Ray almost walked past, but something made him stop. "Mind if I sit?" Hank shrugged, free country. They sat in silence for a while, watching the sparse traffic move through the small town. Finally Hank said, "Bate told me what she said to you this morning. She is scared." "She has reason to be." Hank coughed, a wet rattling sound. "We are going to lose it, the ranch, everything. I have known for months, but I could not say it out loud, could not admit it." "I am sorry." "Not your fault." Hank was quiet for a moment. "Actually, that is not true. Some of it is my fault. The letters I hid. The will I never filed. If I had been honest 30 years ago, if I had let you and Mom work things out, maybe things would be different now. Maybe, or maybe they would be the same. You cannot know." Hank looked at him. "You are not mad." "I am mad," Ray said, "but I am also tired. Tired of being angry, tired of holding grudges, tired of running from the past." "What are you going to do?" "I do not know yet, but I am not leaving, not until I figure out how to help." Hank's eyes filled with tears. "You do not owe us anything. I took your letters. I took your mother's last years with you. I hid your inheritance. You should hate me." "Probably, but what good would that do?" Ray stood. "Mom used to say the land gives back what you give it. I spent 30 years planting regret, got back loneliness. Maybe it is time to plant something different." He walked back to the truck, leaving Hank on the bench. When he got back to the ranch, he went straight to the barn loft, found the metal box Hank had shown him. Inside were the letters, the ones he had written and his mother had never received, and underneath them the will, his mother's will. Ray pulled it out and read it again carefully. "To Ray I leave the South Creek pasture and dry hollow. To Hank I leave the main ranch house and northern grazing land." The document was notarized, legal. His mother's signature was clear and firm despite her age. She had known exactly what she was doing, dividing the land not by value but by what each son needed. Hank got the established ranch, the house, the infrastructure. Ray got empty ground, 40 acres of rocks and scrub that nobody wanted. Except it was not empty. It was the creek bottom, the best soil, the only place with reliable water, the exact land where Ray's garden now grew. His mother had known, had understood what the land could be if someone paid attention, if someone listened, if someone cared. Ray sat in the loft as the sun set, holding the will, understanding finally what his mother had been trying to tell him. The inheritance was not about ownership. It was about responsibility, about being a steward, about understanding that land was not something you possessed but something you tended, and if you tended it well it would tend you back. The question was what to do about it. He could file the will, claim his 40 acres, force a partition of the property. Hank and Bate would have to sell their portion to pay the debts. The family would lose everything and it would be his fault. Again. Or he could tear up the will, pretend it did not exist, let the bank take the whole ranch and scatter the family. Watch everything his grandfather and father and Hank had built disappear into foreclosure. Or there was a third option, one he was just beginning to see, one that would take courage and sacrifice and trust, the kind of trust that had been broken 30 years ago and never repaired. Ray pulled out his mother's journal and turned to the last page, the page he had read to Hank. The land remembers, she had written. It remembers every seed planted, every choice made, every act of faith, and it gives back what you give it. He thought about the garden, about the impossible abundance growing in the middle of drought, about the neighbors stopping to ask questions, about Wyatt learning, about Mrs. Sullivan bringing cuttings, about the way the community was slowly, carefully beginning to gather around something good. The land was giving back, not because of magic, not because of miracles, but because Ray had planted hope instead of regret, connection instead of isolation, generosity instead of fear. The garden was showing him what was possible. Now he just had to find the courage to believe it. Ray closed the journal and looked out the loft window. The garden was dark now, just shapes in the moonlight, but he could feel it growing, could sense the life pulsing through it. Tomorrow he would make a decision. Tomorrow he would choose what to plant next, but tonight he would sit with the weight of it, the responsibility of it, the terrifying possibility that maybe, just maybe, he could help save what was broken. Not with money, not with miracles, but with the same thing that had saved him, the same thing his mother had tried to teach him all those years ago. Attention, patience, faith that the land would give back what you gave it, and the willingness to give everything. He fell asleep in the loft with his mother's journal open on his chest and her will folded carefully beside him. Outside, the garden grew in the darkness, roots reaching deep, leaves reaching high, the strange alchemy of soil and water and seed becoming something more than the sum of its parts. Becoming abundance, becoming hope, becoming proof that broken things could be made whole again if someone was willing to do the work, to stay when it was easier to run, to plant when everyone else had given up. To believe, against all evidence, that spring always follows winter, that green always follows brown, that life always finds a way. In the morning, Ray would have to decide. But tonight, for the first time since coming home, he felt something that had been missing for 30 years. He felt like he belonged. Ray did not file the will, not right away. Instead, he studied it, turned it over in his hands like an artifact from another world, read it again and again until he had memorized every word, every pen stroke of his mother's handwriting. To Ray, I leave the South Creek pasture and dry hollow. Simple words, legal words, but underneath them, layers of meaning he was only beginning to understand. He spread the county survey maps across the floor of the barn loft, traced the property boundaries with his finger. The Carver ranch was 200 acres total. Hank's portion, according to the will, was the main house and northern grazing land, maybe 160 acres, the buildings, the infrastructure, everything that looked valuable on paper. Ray's portion was 40 acres of creek bottom and what the surveyors called dry hollow, rocky ground, scrub brush. Land that produced nothing except water. The creek ran through the middle of Ray's 40 acres, and the hollow, despite its name, held soil, good soil, the kind that drained well but held moisture, the kind his mother had known about, had understood, had protected. Ray found something else in the metal box that morning, tucked beneath the will and the letters, a hand-drawn map in his mother's careful script, not a legal survey but something else, a map of the land as she had seen it, not divided by ownership but by purpose, by potential, by what each piece of ground could give if someone listened to it. She had labeled different areas in her neat handwriting. North pasture, too rocky for cattle but good for goats. South Meadow needs rest, plant native grasses. Creek Bottom, richest soil, protect this. And there, circled in faded ink, the exact spot where Ray's garden now grew. She had written beside it for Ray when he comes home. This ground will feed him if he tends it. Ray sat back on his heels, the map trembling in his hands. His mother had not just divided the land legally. She had divided it spiritually, given each son what he needed, not what he wanted. Hank got the established ranch because he needed security, needed something solid to hold on to, needed to feel like he was continuing what their father and grandfather had built. Ray got empty ground because he needed to build something new, needed space to grow, needed to learn, finally, what his mother had been trying to teach him all those years ago. That land was not about ownership. It was about relationship, about understanding, about becoming part of something larger than yourself. The question was what to do with this knowledge. The will gave him legal rights. The map gave him moral responsibility, but neither gave him a solution to the family's immediate crisis. The bank did not care about spiritual inheritance. They cared about $280,000 in 90 days. Ray was still sitting with the map when he heard voices outside. He looked through the loft window and saw a woman approaching the garden. Not Bate or Emma, Travis's wife, but someone he did not recognize. She was about 30, dressed in worn jeans and a work shirt, carrying a briefcase that looked out of place in the rural setting. She stopped at the edge of the garden and looked around. Ray climbed down from the loft and walked toward her. "Can I help you?" "Are you Ray Carver?" "Yes." She held out her hand. "I am Emma, Travis's wife. We have not been formally introduced." Ray shook her hand, surprised. "Your husband does not want you here." "I know, but I needed to talk to you without the family listening." She glanced back toward the ranch house. "Can we walk?" They walked along the creek, far enough from the buildings that voices would not carry. Emma was quiet for a long time, her face drawn and worried. Finally she said, "Travis is in trouble. Real trouble." "What kind of trouble?" She took a breath. 6 months ago he borrowed $60,000 from a man in Billings, not a bank, a private lender, the kind who charges interest that would make a loan shark look generous. Ray felt his stomach drop. Why? To cover ranch debts Hank did not know about, equipment repairs, vet bills, feed. Things kept breaking and Travis kept fixing them with money he did not have. He was trying to keep the ranch running without worrying his father, but it just kept getting worse. Does Hank know now? No, and Travis is terrified to tell him. The money is due in 45 days. If he does not pay, the man said he would come after the ranch, file liens, force a sale. Travis has been trying to find a way out, but there is not one. She stopped walking and looked at Ray directly. There is a developer from Denver. He has been calling Travis for months, wants to buy the whole ranch, turn it into luxury home sites for rich people who want to play cowboy on the weekends. He offered enough to cover everything, all the debts, Hank's, Travis's, everything. Let me guess, Travis has been considering it. More than considering. Emma's voice was barely a whisper. He has been negotiating, trying to get the price high enough to convince Hank to sell. The developer knows about the water rights, knows the creek runs year-round. He is willing to pay top dollar. How much? $2.5 million. Ray felt like he had been punched. That is more than this place is worth. The water is worth it. In a drought that never ends, reliable water is worth everything. Emma looked at the creek flowing past them. Travis knows this is probably the only chance to save the family from complete ruin, but he also knows selling would destroy his father. Hank would rather die than sell this land. What do you want from me? I want you to know what is happening, what Travis is dealing with. He is not just angry at you because you left or because your garden is thriving. He is angry because your presence makes it harder for him to do what he thinks he needs to do. Every neighbor who stops to see your garden, every person who talks about how the Carvers are still making it work, it makes selling impossible. It makes him look like a quitter. So I should leave. Emma shook her head. No, I do not know what you should do. I just wanted you to understand. Travis is drowning, and he does not know how to ask for help, does not know how to admit he failed. So he is lashing out at the easiest target, you. Thank you for telling me. She turned to go, then stopped. One more thing. The developer is coming next week to make a final offer, to pressure Travis to convince the family. When that happens, things are going to get bad, really bad. I thought you should know. Ray watched her walk back toward the ranch house, her shoulders bent under the weight of secrets. He looked at the creek, flowing clear and cold over smooth stones. $2.5 million, enough to save everyone, enough to wipe away all the debt and give the family a fresh start. All they had to do was sell the land their grandfather had homesteaded, destroy everything 3 generations had built, turn the ranch into a playground for rich city people. He understood Travis's temptation, understood the terrible logic of it. Sometimes the only way to save your family was to destroy the thing they loved most. Ray spent the next week working harder than ever in the garden, trying not to think about the developer, trying not to watch Travis move around the ranch like a man waiting for execution, trying not to see the way Hank looked at his son with confusion and hurt, sensing something was wrong but not knowing what. The garden continued to thrive. Neighbors continued to stop by. Mrs. Sullivan brought more people, elderly ranchers who remembered Ruth Carver and wanted to see what her son was doing. Ray taught them companion planting and water conservation and seed saving, taught them the way his mother had taught him, through demonstration, through doing, through respect for knowledge that came from observation and patience. One morning, Mrs. Sullivan approached him with an idea. We should have a gathering, like your mother used to do, a harvest celebration. Let people see what you have grown, share the food, teach what you have learned, bring the community together. Ray hesitated. I do not know if that is a good idea. The family is going through a hard time. All the more reason. Mrs. Sullivan's voice was firm. Your mother believed community was not just about the good times. It was about standing together through the hard times too. Let people help. Let them be part of this. Against his better judgment, Ray agreed. They set the date for 2 weeks away. Word spread quickly through the small community. People offered to bring food, to help set up, to provide music. The response was overwhelming, more than Ray had imagined possible. But the family's reaction was cold. Hank said nothing, just turned away when Ray mentioned it. Bates' face went tight with anger, and Travis, when he heard, laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Yeah, he said, let's throw a party while the bank forecloses. That sounds perfect. The night before the gathering, Ray sat in the loft with his mother's journal. He had read it cover to cover a dozen times, but he kept finding new things, new insights, new understanding of who she had been. Tonight he found an entry from 5 years before she died. Her writing was shakier, but the words were clear. I am afraid I will die before Ray comes home, afraid he will never know how much I loved him, how much I believed in him, how much I hoped he would find his way back to the land and to himself. But I have to believe the seeds I plant will grow even if I am not here to see them. I have to believe the knowledge I preserve will find its way to him somehow. That is faith, not in miracles, not in magic, but in the slow, patient work of planting and tending and trusting that spring will come. Ray closed the journal and looked out at the dark garden. Tomorrow more than 100 people would gather here, would see what he had grown, would eat food from the land, would learn techniques his mother had perfected over a lifetime. It should have felt like a triumph, like vindication. But all Ray felt was the weight of what was coming. The developer, the deadline, the choice that would tear the family apart. The gathering day dawned clear and hot. By 9 in the morning, people were already arriving. Families with children, elderly couples, young ranchers looking for answers to the drought that was killing their land. They parked along the road and walked down to the creek, their eyes widening as they saw the garden, the impossible green in the middle of brown. Ray had set up tables made from sawhorses and plywood. Neighbors brought food, roasted chicken and potato salad and beans cooked with salt pork, corn bread and coleslaw and 3 kinds of pie. Someone brought a guitar. Someone else brought a fiddle. By noon, there were more than 100 people scattered across the creek bottom, eating and talking and laughing. Ray found himself surrounded by questions. How do you keep the soil moist? What are those yellow things? Can I really grow eggplant in Montana? He answered patiently, demonstrating techniques, offering seeds, explaining his mother's methods in simple, clear language. Several times he looked up to see Wyatt watching from a distance, the boy's face torn between wanting to join and knowing his family would not approve. Mrs. Sullivan stood beside him at one point, surveying the crowd. "Your mother is smiling today," she said. "This is exactly what she dreamed of." "I hope so." "I know so." She patted his arm. "You have given these people something they lost. Hope, connection, the knowledge that they are not alone in this struggle." "I just grew some vegetables." "No, you did much more than that. You showed them that paying attention matters. That old knowledge has value. That the land will give back if you give to it first. That is what your mother taught. That is what you are teaching now." The gathering stretched into the afternoon. Children ran through the garden rows, carefully supervised. Adults stood in clusters discussing rainfall and cattle prices and the long, dry summer. Someone started playing music and couples danced on the packed dirt. For a few hours, the drought and the debt and the looming foreclosure seemed to fade. There was just this: community, connection, people coming together around something good. Ray was helping an elderly rancher select tomato seeds when he saw Travis. His nephew stood at the far edge of the gathering, arms crossed, watching the celebration with a face like stone. Emma was beside him, her hand on his arm, saying something Ray could not hear. Travis shook his head and walked away. Emma followed. As the sun began to set, people started packing up, thanking Ray, promising to come back, taking seeds and cuttings and armfuls of vegetables. Several people pressed money into his hand despite his protests. For the seeds, they said, for the teaching, for giving us hope. By the time the last truck pulled away, Ray had $300 in his pocket and a hollow feeling in his chest. Because he had seen Travis's face, had seen the anger and pain and something darker underneath, and he knew the celebration had made everything worse. That night Ray could not sleep. He lay in the loft listening to the sounds of the ranch, the creek flowing, the wind in the cottonwoods, and then, close to midnight, footsteps on gravel. He looked out the window and saw a figure walking toward the garden, moving with purpose, with anger. Travis. Ray climbed down from the loft and followed. Travis was standing in the middle of the garden, surrounded by the plants Ray had spent months nurturing. The moon was bright enough to see his face, to see the tears streaming down it. "Travis." His nephew spun around. His eyes were wild, desperate. "Stay away from me." "What are you doing out here?" "I do not know." Travis laughed, a broken sound. "I honestly do not know what I am doing anymore." Ray moved closer slowly. "Talk to me." "About what?" "About how you ruined everything. About how your perfect garden and your perfect gathering showed everyone what a failure I am. About how I cannot save this ranch no matter what I do." "You are not a failure." "Yes, I am." Travis's voice rose. "Dad is sick. The ranch is dying. I am drowning in debt I cannot pay. And then you show up and suddenly everything is easy. The garden grows, the neighbors love you, money appears out of nowhere. Do you know what that feels like? To watch someone succeed at everything while you fail at everything. I am not succeeding, I am just growing vegetables. You are making me look like an idiot. Travis gestured wildly at the garden. All these people today, talking about hope and community and the old ways. Do you know what they were really saying? They were saying we failed, that we forgot what matters, that we are not good enough. That is not what they meant. Is it not? Then why does it feel that way? Why does every cabbage you grow feel like proof that I am worthless? Ray saw it then, not just anger but shame, deep corrosive shame that had been eating Travis alive. You are not worthless. Then why cannot I save my family? Why cannot I do what you do? Why cannot I make things grow and thrive and succeed? Because you are trying to do it alone. Because you have been carrying too much for too long. Because you are so afraid of failing that you cannot ask for help. Travis was crying openly now. I borrowed money I cannot pay back, from people who will destroy us if I do not. I have been negotiating to sell this place out from under my father because it is the only way to save him, and I hate myself for it. I hate myself for being weak, for not being enough, for not being you. I am not the answer, Ray said quietly. I am just a man who came home because he had nowhere else to go. But everything you touch turns to gold. No, everything I touch turns to dirt, and then I tend the dirt, and eventually something grows. That is all it is. Attention, patience, willingness to keep trying even when it looks hopeless. Before Travis could respond, light spilled from the ranch house. The door opened and Hank appeared on the porch. Then Bate, then Emma. They must have heard the raised voices, must have come to see what was happening. Hank walked toward the garden, moving slowly in the moonlight. His face was gray, exhausted. When he reached them, he looked from Travis to Ray and back. What is going on? Nothing, Travis said, just talking. At midnight in the garden, crying, that is not nothing. Leave it alone, Dad. I have left it alone for too long. Hank's voice was firm. You have been carrying something for months. I can see it. Your mother can see it. Now tell me what it is. I cannot. Yes, you can. Travis looked at his father and something broke in him. I borrowed money, $60,000, from a man in Billings who charges 30% interest. It is due in 45 days and I do not have it. I was trying to protect you, trying to keep the ranch running without you worrying, but I just made everything worse. Hank closed his eyes. Oh, son. And there is more. A developer from Denver wants to buy the ranch, offered $2.5 million, enough to pay everything we owe, yours, mine, everything. He has been calling for months. I have been negotiating with him. The silence was absolute. Bate put her hand over her mouth. Emma looked at the ground. Hank opened his eyes and looked at his son with something that might have been grief. You were going to sell my ranch. Our ranch, and yes, because I do not see another way to save you, to save any of us. By destroying everything I built, everything my father built. By keeping you alive. Travis's voice broke. The bank is foreclosing in 90 days, Dad. We are going to lose it anyway. At least this way we get something. At least this way you do not die watching them take it. Hank was silent for a long moment. Then he said, there is something I need to tell you, all of you. He looked at Ray, something I should have told 30 years ago. He walked to the edge of the garden and sat down heavily on the ground. The others followed, sat in a circle in the moonlight like some strange ceremony. Hank looked at his hands. When your grandmother was dying, he said to Travis, she asked about Ray every day. Where is he? Is he coming? Does he know I am sick? And I told her lies. He looked up at Ray. I told her you had called, that you said you were happy where you were, that you were not coming back, that you said to tell her goodbye. Ray felt the ground drop away. You what? I lied to her, to my own dying mother. I told her you did not want to see her, that you had moved on, that you did not care. Hank's voice was shaking, and she believed me. She died believing her son abandoned her, believing you chose to stay away. Ray could not speak, could not breathe. The cruelty of it was beyond comprehension. Why he finally managed. Why would you do that? Because I was angry. Hank looked at him with tears streaming down his face. Angry that you left. Angry that she kept hoping you would come back. Angry that she loved you more than she loved me. I know that is not true. I know she loved us both. But I was young and hurt and stupid. So I took away her hope, made her believe you did not care. And when she died, she forgave you. For something you did not even do. Bate was crying now. Emma had her hand over her mouth. Travis looked like he had been struck. Ray sat frozen, trying to process what he had heard. His mother's last days, the forgiveness in her final letter. It had all been based on a lie. She had died forgiving him for cruelty he had never committed, for abandonment that had been prevented by Hank's hidden letters. I have lived with this for 12 years, Hank said, every day, every night. The knowledge that I broke my mother's heart out of spite, that I made her die alone and sad when she should have died with hope, that I took from you the chance to say goodbye. He looked at Ray. I cannot undo it. I cannot bring her back. I cannot give you those last moments. All I can do is tell you the truth and beg you to forgive me. Ray stood, walked away from the circle, stood at the edge of the garden with his back to them, shaking with rage and grief. Behind him he heard Travis say something, heard Bate crying, heard Emma trying to comfort her, but it all sounded distant, underwater. His mother had died believing he did not love her, had died forgiving an abandonment that never happened, had died alone because Hank had lied. 30 years of guilt, 30 years of regret, all based on lies and pride and petty cruelty. Ray turned back to face them. I cannot forgive you, he said to Hank, not for this. Not yet, maybe not ever. I know. But I understand why you did it. I understand being hurt, being angry, making terrible choices because the pain is too much to bear. I have made those choices too, so I cannot hate you. As much as I want to, as much as you might deserve it, I cannot hate you. Hank nodded, his face broken with grief. Travis was sitting with his head in his hands. Bate was holding Emma, both of them crying. This family was shattering, breaking apart under the weight of secrets and lies and fear, and Ray did not know how to stop it. Then Wyatt appeared. The boy came running from the ranch house in his pajamas, his face desperate. Dad, he shouted at Travis. Dad, stop. Travis looked up. What? I saw you, this afternoon with the gas can, putting it in the truck. I know what you are planning. Travis went pale. Wyatt, no. You are going to burn it. The garden. You think if it is gone everything will be easier, but it will not. Please do not do it, please. Ray felt ice in his veins. He looked at Travis. Is that true? Travis stood slowly. His face was gray. I do not know, maybe. I thought about it. I thought if the garden was gone, if there was nothing for people to see, maybe I could convince Dad to sell. Maybe we could just let this place go without everyone judging us for it. So you were going to destroy it, destroy what Ray built, what your grandmother taught him. It is not about the garden. Travis's voice rose. It is about survival. It is about saving this family the only way I know how. By burning hope, Ray said quietly. By destroying the one thing that is working. That is your solution. You do not understand the pressure I am under. Then help me understand. Talk to me. Talk to your father. Talk to someone. But do not burn the garden. Do not destroy something good because you are afraid. I am not afraid. Yes, you are. Ray moved closer. You are terrified of failing, of losing the ranch, of not being enough. I know because I have been terrified my whole life. That is why I ran. That is why I stayed gone for 30 years. Because fear makes you do terrible things, makes you hurt the people you love, makes you destroy what matters most. Travis was shaking. I do not know what else to do. You ask for help. You tell the truth. You stop trying to carry everything alone. And what will that change? We will still lose the ranch. The bank will still foreclose. The developer will still get what he wants. Maybe or maybe not. Ray looked at his family, at Hank broken by guilt, at Bate exhausted by fear, at Travis drowning in shame, at Emma trying to hold everyone together, at Wyatt watching it all with a child's helpless terror. This was his family, broken, flawed, cruel and kind in equal measure. They had hurt him. He had hurt them. They had all failed each other in ways large and small, but they were still family, still bound together by blood and history and the land beneath their feet. Ray pulled the will from his pocket. He had been carrying it for days, trying to decide what to do. Now he knew. I have something to show you, he said. He unfolded the paper and held it out. Hank took it with trembling hands, read it slowly, looked up at Ray with shock. You knew about this for over a week. And you did not file it, did not try to claim your land. No. Why not? Because Mom did not give me that land to own. She gave it so I would have a reason to come home. Ray looked at each of them. She divided the land the way she did because she understood something I am only now learning. That inheritance is not about possession. It is about responsibility. Hank got the ranch because he needed to be a steward. I got empty ground because I needed to learn how to build. Travis is trying to sell because he thinks money will save us, but it will not. Mom knew that. That is why she set things up the way she did. What are you saying? Bate asked. I am saying I am giving the land back, all of it, the 40 acres, the water rights, everything. I am returning it to the family on one condition. What condition? Travis asked. We work it together. We expand the garden. We build a real business. We teach workshops. We sell at farmers markets. We create something that can support the family and serve the community. We do what Mom did. We give back to the land and let it give back to us. That will not pay the debts, Travis said. Not in time. Maybe not, but it is a start, and it is honest work. Not selling our heritage to rich people, not destroying what 3 generations built, actually building something new while honoring what came before. The family sat in silence, in the moonlight, in the garden, processing what Ray had offered. Finally, Hank spoke. You would give up your inheritance, your legal right. For what Mom really wanted, yes. Travis looked at him. And the 60,000 I owe, the developer, the foreclosure. We face it together, all of it, as a family. What if we lose everything anyway? Then at least we lose it trying. At least we lose it with our dignity intact. At least we lose it together. Travis closed his eyes, tears running down his face. I do not deserve this. I was going to burn your garden, was going to sell the ranch, was going to destroy everything. I know, Ray's voice was gentle, and I still choose this. I still choose you. I still choose family, because that is what Mom taught me. That you do not give up on the people you love, even when they hurt you, even when they fail. You keep planting, keep tending, keep hoping something will grow. Hank stood slowly, walked to Ray, pulled him into a rough embrace. Ray stood stiff for a moment, then let himself lean into his brother, let himself feel the weight of reconciliation. It did not erase the pain, did not undo the lies, but it was something, a beginning. Travis approached next, held out his hand. Ray took it, then pulled the younger man into a hug. Travis broke down completely, sobbing against Ray's shoulder. "I am sorry," he kept saying. "I am so sorry." "You are going to be okay," Ray said. "We are all going to be okay." They stood there in the garden, the whole family, holding each other, crying, breaking open and beginning finally to heal. Above them the stars turned in their ancient patterns. Around them the garden grew in the darkness, tomatoes ripening, eggplants swelling, gourds twisting into impossible shapes, the land doing what it had always done, giving back what was given to it, patiently, endlessly, waiting for someone to pay attention. When they finally separated, Bates said, "I will start working on a business plan tomorrow." Emma nodded. "I can handle the legal paperwork, set up an LLC, make it official." Travis wiped his face. "I will build whatever we need, greenhouse, workshop space, market stand, whatever." Hank looked at Ray. "What do you need from me?" "Just be here. Tell your stories, teach what you know, be the grandfather Wyatt needs. That is enough." They walked back to the ranch house together as the moon set, made plans, talked about the future. It was not a solution, not yet. The debt still loomed. The bank was still coming. The developer was still circling. But for the first time they were facing it together, as a family, united instead of divided. Ray stayed outside after the others went in, sat in the garden as dawn began to lighten the eastern sky. He thought about his mother, about the seeds she had saved, about the will she had written, about the faith she had kept that he would come home. She had been planting all along, not just vegetables, not just remedies. She had been planting reconciliation, planting hope, planting the possibility that broken things could be made whole. It had taken 30 years. It had cost her everything. But here he was, home, tending the garden, bringing the family together. "The land remembers," she had written, and sitting there in the dirt, Ray finally understood. The land remembered every seed planted, every choice made, every act of faith in the future. His mother had planted faith, had watered it with hope, had tended it with patience, and now, 3 decades later, it was finally bearing fruit. Not in miracles, not in easy answers, but in a family choosing to try, choosing to stay, choosing to plant something together instead of burning it all down. Ray stood and brushed the dirt from his jeans. The sun was rising. There was work to do, a garden to tend, a family to help, a future to build, one seed at a time, one day at a time, one choice at a time. He looked at the rows of vegetables glowing in the morning light and made a promise to his mother, to himself, to the land. "I will not waste this chance. I will not run again. I will stay and tend what you planted. I will honor what you gave me. I will make sure it was not in vain." The garden did not answer, but the breeze moved through the leaves, carrying the scent of marigolds and earth and growing things. And Ray swore he heard his mother's voice in that wind, saying what she had always said: "Keep planting, keep tending, keep faith. The land will give back, just wait, just work, just believe." And for the first time in 30 years, Ray did believe. Believed that spring followed winter, that green followed brown, that life always, always found a way. Even in the middle of drought, even in the face of debt, even when everything looked hopeless. You just had to keep planting, keep tending, keep choosing hope over fear. That was the inheritance. That was what his mother had given him. That was what he would pass on. Ray walked back to the barn as the sun cleared the mountains. Tomorrow the real work would begin. But today, for this one morning, there was just gratitude, just peace, just the garden growing and the family healing and the land remembering what it had been taught. To give back what you give it, to honor those who tend it, to keep faith through the long winters that one day, when the time was right, spring would come again. They started before dawn, all of them, Ray and Hank and Travis working side by side as the sun rose over the mountains, turning the Montana sky from black to blue to gold. Bate brought coffee in thermoses, and Emma brought breakfast burritos wrapped in foil. Even Wyatt was there, too excited to sleep, carrying tools that were almost too heavy for him but refusing to put them down. The plan was simple: expand the garden from 6 rows to 2 acres, build a greenhouse for year-round production, create a workshop space where Ray could teach, construct a proper farm stand at the end of the driveway, turn what had been one man's quiet garden into a real business, something that could generate income, something that could help pay the debts. It was ambitious, maybe impossible. They had 60 days before the bank's foreclosure deadline, 45 days before Travis's loan came due. No money for materials, no guarantee it would work, but they had something they had not had before: unity, purpose, the willingness to try. Travis surprised everyone. The shame and desperation that had nearly driven him to burn the garden transformed into fierce determination. He threw himself into the physical work with an intensity that was almost frightening. Digging, building, hauling. He worked until his hands bled and his back screamed, and Bate had to force him to stop and eat. "I wasted so much time being afraid," he said one evening, sitting on the porch with Ray after a brutal day of construction. "So much energy worrying about failing that I forgot how to actually do anything." "You are doing something now." "Yeah, but will it be enough?" Ray did not answer, could not answer, because he did not know. None of them knew. All they could do was work and hope and trust that the land would give back what they gave it. Hank was different too. The confession about lying to Ruth seemed to have broken something in him, or maybe freed something. He moved slower than the younger men, but he moved with purpose. He told stories while they worked, about his father homesteading this land, about the first cabin they had built, about winters so hard the cattle froze standing up, about springs so wet the creek flooded and took out the bridge. He talked about Ruth too, finally, after years of silence. He told Wyatt about the remedies she made, the garden she kept, the way neighbors used to come to her with their problems and she would listen and think and usually find a solution. Not magic, Hank said, just attention, just caring enough to really see what was needed. "Like Uncle Ray does," Wyatt said. Hank looked at his brother. "Yeah, like Ray." The garden expansion went faster than Ray expected. Neighbors showed up without being asked, brought equipment, offered labor. A rancher 2 properties over arrived one morning with a tractor and spent the day breaking ground. A retired carpenter came with his tools and helped Travis build the frame for the greenhouse. Mrs. Sullivan organized the women to clear rocks and debris. No one asked for payment. No one expected anything in return. They just showed up and worked, and when Ray tried to thank them, they shrugged it off. "Your mother helped us," they said. "Now we help you. That is how it works." Bate took charge of the business side. She spent hours at the kitchen table with legal pads and calculators, creating spreadsheets and budgets and marketing plans. Emma helped, using her paralegal training to navigate the maze of permits and licenses and regulations. They registered an LLC, filed for a business license, created a simple website, designed flyers for the farmers market. The work was relentless, exhausting. Ray fell into bed each night too tired to dream, but it was also healing. The family was talking again, really talking, not fighting, not defending, just communicating, planning together, making decisions as a unit. 3 weeks in, they had cleared and planted an additional 1.5 acres. The greenhouse frame was up. The workshop space was taking shape in the old barn. The farm stand was half built at the end of the driveway, and the original garden continued to thrive, producing vegetables they sold at the Saturday farmers market in town. Bate ran the market stand with military precision. She priced things fairly but not cheaply, educated customers about the varieties, explained companion planting and water conservation, Sold not just vegetables but seeds and cuttings and consultations. By the third week they were bringing in $400 each Saturday. "It is working," Emma said one evening, tallying the week's earnings. "Slowly, but it is working." Bate looked at the numbers. "We have made $6,000 in 3 weeks. That is good, really good. But we need $280,000 in 60 days. Even if we triple our sales, we will not come close." The reality hit like cold water. They were succeeding, building something real, but it was not enough. Would never be enough in time. Travis sat with his head in his hands. "I thought maybe," he started. "I thought if we worked hard enough." "Hard work does not always pay the bills," Hank said quietly. "I learned that the hard way." "So what do we do?" Wyatt asked. "Do we give up?" "No," Ray's voice was firm. "We keep working, keep building. Even if we cannot save the ranch, we create something worth saving, something we can rebuild with somewhere else." "That is not good enough." Travis stood abruptly. "I am not losing my son's home. I am not watching my father get thrown off land his father homesteaded. There has to be another way." He walked out before anyone could stop him. Emma followed. Through the window, Ray saw them standing by Travis's truck, arguing. Emma trying to calm him down. Travis shaking his head, his face twisted with frustration. "He is going to do something stupid," Bates said. "I can feel it." She was right. The next morning, a black SUV pulled up the driveway. Expensive, new, out of place in the rural setting. A man in pressed khakis and a polo shirt got out. Mid-50s, tanned, the kind of tan that came from golf courses, not manual labor. He looked around the property with an appraiser's eye. Travis walked out to meet him. Ray watched from the garden, too far away to hear but close enough to see Travis's body language. Tense, defensive. The man handed Travis papers, pointed at different parts of the property, talked with smooth gestures and confident posture. "The developer," Hank said quietly. He had come to stand beside Ray. Travis must have called him. Why would he do that after everything? Because he is desperate. Because he is terrified we are going to lose everything anyway, and at least this way we get something. The meeting lasted 20 minutes. When it was over, Travis walked straight to the barn without looking at anyone. The developer got in his SUV and left. Ray found Travis in the barn loft, sitting in the same spot where Ray slept, holding papers. What did he offer? Travis did not look up. $3 million now. Development starts in 90 days. We have to be off the property in 120. That is more than before. He sweetened the deal, heard about the garden, heard about the community interest, thinks it proves the property has tourism potential, wants to build luxury cabins, call it Carver Creek Ranch, market it to rich people who want the authentic Montana experience. He is using our name. He is using everything, our history, our reputation, the garden, all of it, turned into a brand for people with more money than sense. So tell him no. Travis finally looked up. His eyes were red. What if that is the wrong choice? What if I am letting pride destroy my family's future? $3 million. We could pay every debt, set Dad up somewhere comfortable, give Wyatt a real education, start over without this crushing weight. At the cost of your heritage. Heritage does not pay bills. Travis crumpled the papers. I hate this. I hate that he is right. That selling is the smart choice, the responsible choice, but I cannot do it. I cannot be the one who ends 3 generations of Carvers on this land. Then do not be. How do I save us without selling? I do not know, but we figure it out together. Travis laughed bitterly. Together. You keep saying that like it is magic, like working together automatically solves everything. But it does not. We are still going to lose this place. All our work will not matter. The garden will not matter. None of it will matter when the bank takes it. Ray sat beside him. Maybe you are right. Maybe we lose the ranch. But the garden will matter. The work will matter. What we built together will matter, because we will carry it with us wherever we go. That is not enough. It has to be. They sat in silence as the sun set. Ray thought about his mother, about the seeds she had saved, about the faith she had kept that things would work out. Had she been naive, foolish, or had she understood something deeper, that the point was not the outcome but the planting, not the harvest but the tending? The loan shark came 3 days later. He was not what Ray expected, not violent or threatening, just a tired-looking man in a cheap suit who sat at the kitchen table and laid out the facts. Travis owed $63,000 with interest, due in 32 days. If he did not pay, the man would file liens against the property, accelerate the foreclosure, make it impossible for any last-minute salvation. I do not want to do that, the man said, but I have investors, people I answer to. This is business. Can you give us more time? Travis asked. How much more? 90 days. The man shook his head. 30 days maximum, and the interest keeps running. After he left, Travis punched the wall hard enough to crack the plaster. Bate cried silently at the table. Hank sat staring at nothing. The weight of it was crushing. Even Ray, who had walked away from everything once before, felt the suffocating pressure of deadlines and debt and impossible choices. That night Ray could not sleep. He walked out to the garden at midnight and stood among the rows. The plants were thriving. The expansion was working. In another month they would have twice the production. In 6 months they could be profitable. But they did not have 6 months. They had 30 days. He thought about praying but did not know who to pray to. His mother maybe. The land itself. Some force that understood the language of growing things and desperate men. He thought about his mother's last entry in her journal. I have to believe the seeds I plant will grow even if I am not here to see them. Have to believe spring will come. But what if spring came too late? What if the seeds were perfect and the soil was rich and the tending was faithful but the season was just too short? What then? Ray was still in the garden when Hank found him an hour later. His brother moved slowly in the moonlight. His breathing labored from the walk. They stood together looking at the rows of vegetables. I have been keeping something from you, Hank said finally, from everyone. Ray waited. When Mom died, she had a life insurance policy, $150,000. I was the beneficiary. Ray felt his stomach drop. $150,000. That would almost cover the bank debt. I could not touch it. Hank's voice was rough, could not even look at it. It felt like blood money, like I was profiting from her death, from my lies. Every time I thought about using it, I remembered telling her you did not want to see her, remembered making her die believing her son abandoned her. How could I use that money? How could I spend it on myself? You have had it this whole time, while the ranch was failing, while Travis was borrowing from loan sharks. I know, Hank was crying now, I know, it is insane, but every time I got close to touching it I would freeze, would see her face, would hear myself lying to her, and I could not do it. Ray did not know what to feel. Anger, relief, frustration, all of it at once. That money could have prevented everything, could have saved Travis from his desperate choices, could have kept the family from this crisis, and Hank had just sat on it, paralyzed by guilt. But looking at his brother in the moonlight, seeing the broken man who had carried this secret for 12 years, Ray understood. Guilt was not rational. Shame did not care about practicality. Hank had punished himself in the cruelest way possible, by having the solution and being unable to use it. You could use it now, Ray said. It is too late. 150 is not enough. We need 280 for the bank plus 63 for the loan. We are still almost 200,000 short. So we sell something, equipment, land rights, something. Hank shook his head. We have already sold everything we could. The equipment is worthless, ancient, broken. And the land, he gestured around them, this is it. This is all we have. What about water rights? The creek runs year-round, in a drought that has to be worth something. Maybe, but selling water rights means selling our ability to irrigate, means killing the garden, means destroying the one thing that is working. They were silent for a long time. Then Ray said, you have to use the money, you have to let it go. I cannot. You have to, not for yourself, for Mom. She left it for the family, for this. She would want it used to save the ranch, to keep her grandchildren here, to preserve what she loved. She would hate that I lied to her. Probably, but she would hate more that you are using that lie as an excuse to destroy her family. She would want you to forgive yourself, to move forward, to do what needs to be done. Hank was sobbing now, full-body sobs that shook his thin frame. I do not know how. You just do it. Tomorrow you go to the bank, you withdraw the money, you use it to pay what we can, and then we figure out the rest. What if I cannot? Then I will go with you. We will do it together. They stood in the garden until dawn, not talking, just being present. Two brothers who had spent 30 years apart learning how to be family again, learning that forgiveness was not about forgetting. It was about choosing to move forward anyway, about planting hope even when the ground looked barren. In the morning, Hank went to the bank. Ray went with him. They withdrew $150,000, brought it to the main bank in town, applied it to the ranch loan. The bank officer looked at the payment with surprise. This brings your balance to $130,000, she said. You still have 60 days to the foreclosure deadline. If you can come up with the rest, we can restructure the loan. 130 is better than 280, Ray said, but it is still impossible. Not impossible, the woman said. Difficult, but not impossible. They drove back to the ranch in silence, told the family what they had done. Bate cried with relief. Emma started calculating immediately. 130 plus the 63 for the loan shark. Call it 200,000 total. The farmer's market is bringing in 600 a week now. The workshops Ray is teaching bring in another 800. That is 5,600 a week. For 30 weeks we would have it, Travis said, but we have 4 weeks, maybe 5. We increase capacity. Bates' voice was firm. We do more workshops, bigger markets. We sell consultations. We create a CSA program. People pay up front for vegetables delivered weekly. That might get us another 10,000, Emma said. Total. We would still be 190 short. The room fell silent. They had made progress, real progress, but the math was brutal, unforgiving. They could work themselves to death and still fall short. That afternoon, Ray was teaching a workshop on companion planting. 20 people had paid $30 each to spend 4 hours learning techniques his mother had perfected over a lifetime. He demonstrated intercropping patterns, explained how marigolds repelled aphids, showed them how to read soil moisture by touch and smell. An older rancher raised his hand. How much would you charge to consult on our place? Help us set up a system like this. Ray hesitated. I do not know. I have not thought about it. Think about it. We would pay good money to learn this, to make our land productive again. After the workshop, 3 more people approached with the same request. By evening, Ray had promises for 5 consultations at $500 each. $2,500. It was something, but it was not enough. The weeks blurred together, working before dawn, teaching during the day, building at night. The garden expanded to 3 acres. The greenhouse was completed. The workshop space was functional. The farm stand was beautiful, hand-built from reclaimed wood, with a painted sign that read Carver Creek Garden in Bates' careful lettering. They were producing more vegetables than they could sell locally. Emma found markets in Billings and Bozeman, started delivering twice a week. The revenue climbed, 7,000 a week, 8,000. Once, in a particularly good week, 9,000. But it was not enough, would never be enough in time. Travis met with the loan shark again, tried to negotiate an extension. The man refused, tried to negotiate a partial payment. The man refused. The deadline was absolute. Pay in full or face the consequences. The developer called twice more, raised his offer to $3.2 million, then $3.5. He knew they were desperate, could smell it. Travis hung up both times, but Ray saw the temptation in his eyes, saw him doing the math, weighing his son's future against his father's past. With 2 weeks left, they were still $90,000 short. Bate had maxed out every credit card. Emma had borrowed from her parents. They had sold every piece of equipment that still worked. They had nothing left to leverage, nothing left to sell. Except the land itself. The family meeting that night was grim. They sat around the kitchen table with the numbers spread in front of them. The numbers that did not lie. That said, despite their best efforts, they had failed. "We could sell the North 40, Hank said quietly. The rocky pasture. It is useless for grazing, but a developer might want it. Could get 50, maybe 60,000. That still leaves us 30 short, Bates said. So we find 30. We borrow, we beg, we figure it out. From who? Travis asked. We have tapped everyone we know. Every bank has turned us down. We are out of options. Then we sell more land, Hank said. The Ridge property, another 50 acres. Dad, no. Travis's voice broke. If we start selling land, we are just prolonging the inevitable. Better to lose it all at once than watch it get carved up piece by piece. So what do you want to do? Hank's voice rose. Give up. Let them take it. Watch 3 generations of work disappear. Yes, Travis stood. Yes, that is exactly what I want. Because at least then it is over. At least then we can stop fighting. Stop killing ourselves for something we cannot save. Travis, Emma reached for him, but he pulled away. I am done. I am so goddamn done. We worked ourselves to the bone, did everything right, built something beautiful, and it is still not enough. Nothing is ever enough, so fine. Let the bank take it. Let the developer turn it into rich people's playground. I cannot fight anymore. He walked out. The door slammed. Emma followed. Through the window, Ray saw them arguing by the truck, saw Travis get in and drive away, saw Emma standing alone in the dark. Bate was crying silently. Hank sat with his head in his hands. Wyatt looked terrified. Ray felt the weight of failure crushing down on them all. They had tried. God, they had tried, but trying was not enough. Ray walked out to the garden, stood among the rows of thriving plants, the abundance they had created, the hope they had planted. It was all about to be destroyed, sold off, turned into something else. Something that had nothing to do with 3 generations of Carvers who had loved this land and tended it and believed it would sustain them. He thought about his mother, about her faith that things would work out. Had she been wrong? Had she spent her life believing in something that did not exist, that the land would provide, that hard work mattered, that family would endure? Or had she been planting something that took longer than one lifetime to grow? Ray did not have answers. All he had was the garden, the plants his mother had taught him to grow, the techniques she had preserved, the knowledge she had passed down. It was not enough to save the ranch, but it was something. It was real. It would outlast the debt and the deadlines and the loss. He was still standing there when Mrs. Sullivan found him. The old woman walked slowly through the rows, touching plants as she passed. "Your mother knew this might happen," she said. "Knew what?" "That the ranch might be lost, that the bank might take it, that the family might scatter. She knew, and she planted anyway, saved seeds anyway, taught anyone who would listen anyway." Why, if she knew it might be for nothing? Because it was never about the ranch. Mrs. Sullivan looked at him with wise old eyes. It was about the knowledge, the wisdom, the way of seeing the world. That does not die when you lose land. That goes with you, lives in you, gets passed on to the next generation. We failed her. No, you honored her. You came home. You learned what she taught. You shared it with others. You brought this family back together. The ranch was just dirt and grass. This, she gestured at the garden, at the family inside the house, this is what mattered to her. It does not feel like enough. It never does, but it is. It is enough. She left him there in the darkness. Ray stood until the cold drove him inside. The family was still at the table, still sitting with the numbers that did not work. He sat down with them. "We are not giving up," he said. "We have 2 weeks. We work, we sell, we do everything we can. And if it is not enough, then at least we tried. At least we stood together. At least we did not sell out to the developer. We lost with our dignity intact." "That is not much comfort," Bates said. "Maybe not, but it is all we have." They worked the final 2 weeks like people possessed. Sold vegetables, taught workshops, did consultations. Every dollar went into the fund. They reached 170,000, 180, 185. With 3 days left they hit 190. Still 10,000 short. The night before the deadline, Travis came to Ray, handed him a business card. The developer. One last chance. $4 million now. They sign in the morning. Ray looked at the card. $4 million. Enough to pay everything and set the family up for life. All they had to do was walk away. "What do you want to do?" Ray asked. Travis was quiet for a long time. "I want to stay. I want to keep the ranch. I want Wyatt to grow up here like I did, but I do not see how." "Then we try until the last minute. We do not give up until we have to. And if we lose, then we rebuild somewhere else, together." Travis nodded, put the card in his pocket. "Okay, we try." They stayed up all night, making calls, reaching out to everyone they knew, begging for loans, for investments, for anything. By dawn they had promises for another 6,000, still 4,000 short. At 8 in the morning they drove to town, to the bank, to face the foreclosure, the whole family together. When they walked in, the bank officer looked surprised. "You are here to pay?" she asked. "As much as we can," Hank said. She looked at her computer, frowned, looked again. "I am sorry. There must be an error. Your account shows the loan is paid in full. Forgiven balance of $10,312 as of this morning." "That is impossible." She turned the screen to show them. There it was, payment received, balance 0, loan satisfied. "Who paid it?" Ray asked. The officer checked. "It says community fund, multiple small contributions, 73 separate payments ranging from $50 to $500. Ray felt the floor shift beneath him. Mrs. Sullivan, the workshop participants, the farmers market customers, the neighbors who had stopped to see the garden, they had come together, 73 people, giving what they could, paying the debt that was not theirs. Travis sat down heavily. Bates started crying. Hank just stared at the screen like it was written in a foreign language. Wyatt tugged on Ray's sleeve. "Does this mean we get to stay?" "Yeah," Ray said, his voice breaking. "We get to stay." They drove back to the ranch in a daze, found 24 cars parked along the road. People gathered in the garden. Mrs. Sullivan stood at the center, smiling. "Welcome home," she said. The celebration lasted all day. People brought food and music and stories. They walked through the expanded garden, admired the greenhouse, bought vegetables and seeds, and signed up for workshops. They had not just paid a debt. They had invested in something they believed in, something that had brought hope to a community that desperately needed it. As the sun set, Ray found Hank sitting alone on the porch. His brother was crying quietly. Ray sat beside him. "Mom would have loved this," Hank said. "She did love it. She planned for it, planted the seeds for it. I spent so much time being angry. At you, at her, at the world, and I missed it, missed what she was trying to show us. You see it now." "Yeah, I see it now." They sat together watching the garden glow in the last light, watching Wyatt play with other children, watching Travis laugh with neighbors, watching Bate and Emma organize the next workshop schedule, watching a family that had been broken come back together. Not because of money, not because of miracles, but because they had planted something worth saving, and the community had responded, had chosen to invest, had chosen to believe. The land had given back what they gave it, just like his mother always said it would. You just had to be patient, had to keep planting, had to keep faith through the long winter that spring would eventually come. And here it was, spring, finally, after 30 years of running, after 12 years of his mother being gone, after months of desperate struggle. Spring had come. 6 months later, the first snow fell on the Montana Hollow. Ray stood at the barn door watching the flakes settle on the sleeping garden, covering the raised beds and the empty rows with a blanket of white. The greenhouse glowed warm in the gray light, its panels frosted at the edges but the inside green and alive. Lettuce and herbs and winter greens growing under carefully tended heat. The transformation was almost impossible to believe. Where there had been 6 struggling rows, there were now 4 acres of organized production. The greenhouse Travis had built stood solid and tight against the weather. The workshop space in the renovated barn could hold 30 people comfortably. The farm stand at the end of the driveway, beautiful with its hand-painted sign reading Ruth's Garden in Bates' careful script, was closed for winter but would open again in spring. The ranch was debt-free, the bank satisfied, the loan shark paid off and gone. The developer's calls had stopped after the community had rallied and saved the place. The land was theirs again, not Hank's alone, not Ray's inheritance, but the family's together, held in trust for the next generation and the one after that. Ray walked through the falling snow to the greenhouse. Inside it was warm and humid, smelling of earth and growing things. Travis was there, checking moisture levels, adjusting the heating system he had installed with such precision it barely used any propane. He looked up when Ray entered. "Morning." "Morning." Ray touched a lettuce plant, feeling the firm, crisp leaves. "These are ready." "Yeah, Bate wants to start selling winter greens at the indoor market. Thinks we can get premium prices." She is right. People are desperate for fresh food in February. Travis smiled. It was still strange to see. His nephew had carried tension in his face for so long that relaxation looked almost foreign. But it was real. The therapy was working. The shame had begun to lift. The fear of failure had loosened its grip. "I never thanked you," Travis said, "for what you did, for giving back your inheritance, for believing we could make this work. You would have done the same." "I do not know if that is true, but I am grateful anyway." They worked together in comfortable silence, harvesting greens, checking the irrigation lines, making notes about what needed attention. The greenhouse had become Travis's domain. He had discovered a gift for it, for understanding the delicate balance of heat and moisture and light that kept plants alive through Montana winters. He ran weekend workshops now, teaching other ranchers how to extend their growing seasons, charging good money for the knowledge, building something of his own. Emma appeared at the greenhouse door, her breath puffing white in the cold. Workshop is starting. 22 people signed up. That is a record, Travis said. People are desperate to learn. Emma smiled. Your uncle is booked solid through March. Ray had not planned to become a teacher. It had happened organically. One workshop led to another. Word spread. Ranchers struggling with drought and depleted soil came looking for answers. Ray showed them companion planting and water conservation and soil building, showed them the techniques his mother had perfected, shared everything freely. The workshops paid well enough to support the family comfortably. More importantly, they were spreading the knowledge, planting seeds that would grow long after Ray was gone. The morning workshop was about winter gardening. Ray stood in the barn workshop space, surrounded by ranchers and homesteaders and curious town folk, and taught them what his mother had taught him: how to select cold hardy varieties, how to use row covers and cold frames, how to read the soil and the sky and plan for the seasons. He demonstrated with his hands, showing rather than telling, letting people touch and smell and understand through doing. An older rancher in the back raised his hand. This is what your mother did, taught like this. Yes. Why did people stop listening to her? The rancher's face was serious, respectful, because they were afraid. Afraid that if the old ways worked, it meant the new ways were wrong. Afraid that listening to a woman meant admitting they did not know everything. Afraid that change was necessary, and change is always frightening. Are they still afraid? Ray looked around the room. 22 people who had paid to be here, who had driven through snow to learn, some, but less than before. Drought has a way of making people humble, makes them willing to try anything, even things they once called crazy. After the workshop, a younger man approached. Mid-30s, sun-weathered, calloused hands. I have 100 acres going to weeds. Lost my cattle 2 years ago. Bank is patient but not forever. Could you look at it? Tell me if there is anything worth saving. Ray knew the answer before seeing the land. There was always something worth saving, always potential if someone was willing to see it, to work for it, to believe in it. Of course, he said. When do you want me to come? They scheduled it for the following week. Ray added it to his calendar, which was filling up fast. Consultations, workshops, speaking at the county extension office. Somewhere in the last 6 months he had become something he never intended, a voice for the old ways, a bridge between generations, a keeper of his mother's flame. The family gathered for dinner that evening like they did every night now. The kitchen was loud and warm and chaotic. Hank sat at the head of the table, thinner than he had been but healthier. The cough was gone. The color had returned to his face. He told stories while Bate cooked, entertaining Wyatt and the neighbor kids who seemed to always be around now. Your great-grandmother once grew a pumpkin so big 3 kids could sit in it, Hank said. We hollowed it out for Halloween, kept it on the porch all winter. In spring, we planted the seeds and got 20 more giant pumpkins. Can we do that? Wyatt asked. If you want, but you have to tend them, water them every day, talk to them like Uncle Ray does. I will, I promise. Bate brought food to the table, roasted chicken from a neighbor's farm, potatoes and carrots from the root cellar, bread she had baked that morning. The meal was simple but abundant. They held hands around the table while Hank said grace, not a religious man but grateful nonetheless, grateful for food and family and second chances. During dinner, Travis talked about an order from a restaurant in Billings. They want to buy our winter greens, as much as we can produce, premium prices. How much? Bate asked. Enough to hire help for spring planting, maybe even enough to build a second greenhouse. Let us not get ahead of ourselves, Hank said, but it is good, real good. Emma mentioned the LLC paperwork was finalized, the business officially registered, the insurance secured, everything legal and proper. We are legitimate, she said with a smile. A real agribusiness. Do not let it go to your head, Bates said. We are still farmers, still working the land like people have for generations. Just with better bookkeeping, Emma countered. They laughed. The sound filled the kitchen, warmth and connection and the ease of people who had been through fire together and survived. Ray watched them and felt something he had not felt in 30 years, belonging. Not just presence but true belonging, being part of something larger than himself. After dinner, Ray walked out to the garden. The snow had stopped. The sky was clearing. Stars appeared in the black spaces between clouds. The land was quiet under its white blanket, sleeping but not dead, just resting, gathering strength for spring. He thought about his mother, about the journal she had kept, the seeds she had saved, the faith she had held that he would come home, that the family would heal, that the land would provide. She had been right about all of it. It had taken 3 decades and more pain than any of them deserved, but she had been right. Ray heard footsteps behind him. Wyatt appeared, bundled in a heavy coat, his breath making clouds in the cold air. Cannot sleep, the boy said. Me neither. They stood together looking at the white expanse, the garden invisible under snow but still there, still present, waiting for spring. Uncle Ray, Wyatt said, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you think great-grandma knew that all this would happen, that you would come back and save the ranch and teach people? Ray considered the question carefully. I think she hoped. I think she planted seeds not knowing if they would grow. She saved techniques and knowledge not knowing if anyone would use them. She had faith that things would work out even when there was no evidence they would. That is pretty brave. Yeah, it is. Are you brave like her? Ray laughed softly. No, I ran away. Stayed gone for 30 years because I was afraid. She was brave. I am just finally learning to be. But you came back. That is brave. Maybe, or maybe I just ran out of places to run. They were quiet for a while. Then Wyatt said, I want to be like you when I grow up. Want to understand plants and soil and how to make things grow. You are already like that. You pay attention, you ask good questions, you care about the work. Will you teach me everything? Everything great-grandma taught you? I will teach you everything I can, but the real teacher is the land. You learn by doing, by trying and failing and trying again, by listening to what the ground needs. That is what she taught me. Not facts, but how to see, how to understand. I am keeping a journal, like hers, writing down what I learn every day. Ray felt his throat tighten. That is good, real good. Someday your kids will read it, learn from it, just like I learned from hers. Will we always live here, on the ranch? I do not know. Nothing is forever, but we will keep it as long as we can, take care of it, pass it on better than we found it. That is all anyone can do. Wyatt nodded, satisfied with the answer. They walked back to the house together. Inside, the windows glowed warm and yellow. The family still gathered around the kitchen table. Home. The winter passed in a rhythm of work and rest. Ray taught workshops twice a week, did consultations for neighboring ranches, helped people see potential in land they had given up on. Everywhere he went, he carried his mother's message. Pay attention. Listen to what the land needs. Give back more than you take. The old ways are not outdated. They are foundational. Travis expanded the greenhouse operation, built cold frames for early spring crops, designed a rainwater collection system for summer irrigation. He worked with the same intensity he had once brought to his fear but channeled differently now. into creation instead of destruction, into building instead of burning. Bait transformed the farm stand into something more. Ruth's market sold not just vegetables but preserves and honey from local beekeepers and wool from neighboring sheep ranchers. She created a community hub, a place where people gathered to buy food and share news and connect. The stand was only open Saturday mornings, but it became an institution, a marker of the week, a reminder that good things were possible. Hank settled into the role of elder statesman. He no longer worked the physical labor. His body could not take it, but he told stories, preserved history, served as the living link between past and future. Children would gather around him at the market, listening to tales of the old days, of his father and grandfather, of Ruth and her gardens, of the land when it was wild and new. Emma handled the business side with quiet competence. She managed the books and the taxes and the endless paperwork that came with running a legitimate operation. She kept them legal, kept them organized, kept them afloat when the numbers got tight. And they did get tight sometimes. Winter was slow. Expenses continued even when revenue dropped, but they always made it, always found a way. Spring came early that year. By March the snow was gone and the ground was soft enough to work. The family gathered to plan the planting. 4 acres to manage, crops to rotate, seeds to order, workshops to schedule, markets to prepare for. It was overwhelming, ambitious, maybe impossible. But they had done impossible before. Ray was in the greenhouse starting tomato seedlings when a black SUV pulled up the driveway. His stomach clenched. He recognized the vehicle, the developer. The man had not called in months. Ray had thought he had given up, moved on to easier targets. But here he was, getting out of his expensive truck, looking around the property with the same appraising eye. Ray met him at the edge of the garden. The man smiled, professional, practiced, Ray Carver. "That is me. Beautiful operation you have built here. Really impressive. I have been following your success. The workshops, the market, the community response. Very inspiring. What do you want?" The man pulled papers from his briefcase. "I want to make you an offer, not for the whole ranch, just your 40 acres, the creek bottom and hollow, $800,000. You keep working here. We develop luxury eco-tourism around the garden. You become the face of it. Guaranteed salary, benefits, security for life." Ray felt the ground shift. $800,000 for land he had given back to the family. Land he had no legal claim to anymore, but land that was spiritually his inheritance, his mother's gift. "Why would you pay that much for 40 acres? "Because of what you have proven, that this land can produce, that people will pay to learn these techniques, that there is a market for authentic agricultural tourism. You have built the brand. I want to invest in it, expand it, make it financially sustainable." "We are already sustainable. You are scraping by, one bad season from disaster. I am offering security, stability, a chance to do what you love without the constant financial pressure. At the cost of ownership. At the gain of partnership." The man's smile widened. "You keep doing what you are doing. We handle the business side, market it properly, scale it up. This could be a model for rural economic development. Your mother's legacy reaching thousands instead of dozens." Ray looked at the garden, at the greenhouse, at the family property that had almost been lost, at everything they had built together through sacrifice and community and sheer stubborn will. $800,000. He could retire, never worry about money again, keep teaching but without the stress of survival. It was tempting, God, it was tempting. "Let me talk to my family," Ray said. "Of course, take your time. The offer is good for 30 days. The man handed Ray his card. "Think about it. Really think about what this could mean. For you, for the community, for your mother's memory." He drove away. Ray stood holding the card, feeling its weight. He walked to the house, found the family in the kitchen, told them about the offer. 800,000, Travis said quietly. That is life-changing money. It is blood money, Hank said. Same as before. Someone trying to take what we built and turn it into something else. It is not the same, Emma said. This is a partnership. Ray keeps working. We keep the ranch. We just get financial security. We already have security, Bates said. We have each other. We have the land. We have purpose. Why would we risk that for money? Because money is not evil, Travis said. Money is what kept us from losing this place. Money is what lets us expand and grow and help more people. Money is what we killed ourselves trying to get, Hank countered. Money is what drove you to borrow from criminals and nearly destroy everything. Have you forgotten already? The room fell silent. Old wounds, old fears, even healed, the scars were tender. Ray cleared his throat. Let us vote, all of us, equal voices, we decide together. What are we voting on exactly? Emma asked. Whether I accept the offer, whether we let the developer invest in the 40 acres, whether we prioritize security over independence. They sat around the same table where they had faced foreclosure, the same table where Hank had confessed his lies, the same table where they had chosen to fight together instead of surrender. Ray looked at each of them, saw the calculation, the weighing, the fear and hope and uncertainty. I vote no, Hank said. We did not fight this hard to give control to someone else. I vote no, Bates said. Ruth would not want this. I vote no, Wyatt said. I want to keep learning from Uncle Ray, not from some company. Emma hesitated, then said, I vote no. We have built something real here, something authentic. Money would corrupt that. They all looked at Travis. He sat with his head in his hands. Ray could see the struggle, the memory of debt, the terror of losing everything, the temptation of security. Finally, Travis looked up. His eyes were wet. I vote no. He laughed bitterly. God help me, I vote no, because my son is right, because Bate is right, because this place is worth more than money, even if that makes us fools. Ray felt something release in his chest. He looked at the card in his hand. $800,000, security, stability, everything he had never had. He walked to the trash can and dropped the card inside. Unanimous then, he said. We keep the land, we keep the work, we keep what we built. Are you sure? Emma asked. That is a lot of money to walk away from. I am sure. Ray sat down at the table. My mother spent her whole life teaching me that freedom is not about having no ties. It is about choosing what you are tied to. For 30 years I ran because I thought freedom meant being alone, being independent, owing nothing to anyone, but I was wrong. Real freedom is choosing your family, choosing your land, choosing your purpose, even when it is hard, especially when it is hard. So we keep struggling, Travis said. We keep working. There is a difference. Is there? Yes, struggling is fighting against something. Working is building towards something. We are not struggling anymore. We are building. Bate reached across the table and took Ray's hand. Your mother would be proud. I hope so. That night Ray could not sleep. He walked out to the garden under a sky thick with stars. The spring air was cold but not freezing. The smell of earth and possibility hung in the darkness. He thought about the offer, about the security it represented, about the temptation to stop fighting, to let someone else carry the weight. But his mother had not taken the easy path. She had carried the weight her whole life, alone often, mocked sometimes, but faithful always, faithful to the land, to the knowledge, to the belief that what she was doing mattered, not because it made money, not because it was easy, but because it was right. Ray heard footsteps. Wyatt appeared carrying a flashlight. "You okay?" the boy asked. "Yeah, just thinking. About the money. About choices. About what matters. About why we do the work we do. Do you regret it, saying no?" Ray thought about the question honestly. "No, I do not. The money would have been nice, would have made life easier. But easy is not the same as meaningful. Your great-grandmother taught me that. Took me 30 years to learn it, but I finally did." "Will we be okay without the money?" "We will be fine. We have the garden, we have the workshops, we have each other. That is enough." Wyatt was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I am glad you came home." "Me too. Even though it was hard." "Especially because it was hard. Easy things do not change you. Hard things do. Coming home was the hardest thing I ever did, but it was also the best." They stood together in the darkness. Uncle and nephew, teacher and student. 2 points on a line that stretched back through Ruth and her parents and the generations before. A line that would continue through Wyatt and his children and the children after. A line of people who understood that land was not property but relationship. Not possession but responsibility. The weeks turned to months. Spring became summer. The garden exploded with growth. 4 acres of vegetables and flowers and herbs. The greenhouse stayed productive even in heat. The workshops continued, teaching 50 people a month now. The market thrived. Ruth's Market became known throughout the county as the place to get real food, grown with care, sold with integrity. Other ranches started adopting the techniques. Ray consulted on 8 properties that summer, helped people see their land differently, helped them understand that drought did not mean giving up. It meant adapting, learning, doing things differently. By August, there was an informal cooperative. 12 ranches sharing seeds and knowledge and equipment, supporting each other, building resilience together. The developer never came back. His offer expired unclaimed. Ray heard through neighbors that he had moved on to Colorado, looking for easier marks, people more desperate, more willing to sell their heritage for security. In September, they held another harvest gathering, bigger than the year before. More than 200 people came. They set up tables in the meadow, served food from the garden, played music, danced, celebrated not just the harvest but the community, the connections, the way people had come together around something good. Ray stood at the edge of the gathering watching. Hank was telling stories to a circle of children. Travis was showing someone his greenhouse design. Bate was organizing a seed swap. Emma was collecting names for next year's CSA program. Wyatt was helping younger kids plant marigold seeds in small pots to take home. Mrs. Sullivan found him there, standing alone in the midst of abundance. "Your mother is smiling today," she said. "I hope so. I know so. This is exactly what she dreamed of. Not just the garden but the gathering, the community, the passing on of knowledge. You did it. You honored her legacy. We all did it, together." "Yes, but you started it. You came home when you did not have to. You stayed when it was hard. You chose this over easier paths. That matters." Ray did not know what to say to that, so he just nodded. Mrs. Sullivan patted his arm and walked away, leaving him with the weight of her words, the responsibility of legacy, the knowledge that what he built here would outlast him, would continue through Wyatt and the other students, would spread through the community like seeds on the wind. As the sun set, Ray found himself standing in the original garden, the 6 rows that had started everything. They were still there, still producing. The purple cabbage and marigolds and eggplants. The strange gourds twisting into impossible shapes. He touched a tomato plant, feeling the rough stem, the fuzzy leaves, smelling the green scent that meant life and growth and possibility. He pulled his mother's photograph from his pocket, creased and faded, the image of a young woman and a boy in a garden, both smiling. He had carried this picture for 30 years, across deployments and apartments and lonely roads, a talisman, a reminder, a promise he had not known he was making. Uncle Ray. Wyatt stood at the edge of the garden, his young face serious in the fading light. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Was it worth it, coming back after 30 years, going through everything you went through, all the pain and fighting and almost losing it all? Was it worth it?" Ray looked at the garden, at the gathering beyond, at the family he had almost lost and then found again, at the community that had saved them, at the land that had given back what they gave it. "Yes," he said, "it was worth it, all of it." "Why?" "Because I learned what my mother was trying to teach me, that the land remembers. Every seed planted, every choice made, every act of faith. It remembers and it gives back. Not always in the way you expect, not always when you want, but always eventually, if you are patient, if you keep tending, if you keep believing." Wyatt looked at the photograph in Ray's hand. "Is that you and great-grandma?" "Yeah, a long time ago." "You look happy." "We were." Ray felt tears prick his eyes. "We were very happy." "Do you miss her?" "Every day, but she is still here. In the garden, in the techniques. In you learning and growing, she is here." Wyatt nodded, wise beyond his years. "Will you teach me everything, everything she taught you?" "I will teach you everything I can, but remember, the real teacher is the land. You learn by listening, by paying attention, by being willing to fail and try again." "I will remember." They walked back to the gathering together, the garden behind them, dark now except for the stars overhead, but still growing, still giving, still doing what gardens do, turning soil and water and seed into abundance, into hope, into proof that broken things could be made whole. The gathering wound down as full dark came. People packed up their dishes, gathered their children, said goodbyes and see you soons, promised to come to the next workshop, to bring friends, to keep learning. They drove away slowly, headlights cutting through the darkness until only the family remained. They sat on the porch in the cool night air, tired but satisfied, Hank in his chair, Bate beside him, Travis and Emma on the steps, Wyatt leaning against his father. Ray stood at the railing looking out at the dark garden, at the land his grandfather had homesteaded, that his father had worked, that Hank had nearly lost, that Ray had helped save. It was not perfect. There would be more droughts, more challenges, more moments when selling would be easier than staying, but they would face them together, as a family, as a community, as stewards of something larger than themselves. That was the inheritance, not land, not money, not even the garden itself, but the understanding that you are part of something that existed before you and will exist after you, that your job is not to own but to tend, not to possess but to preserve, not to control but to nurture. Ray's mother had planted that understanding in him when he was young. He had rejected it, run from it, spent 30 years trying to forget it, but it had waited for him, patient as the land itself. And when he finally came home, finally stopped running, finally opened himself to learning, it had been there, waiting, ready to grow. Now he was planting it in Wyatt, in the workshop students, in the neighboring ranchers, in everyone who stopped to see the garden and ask how it was possible, how vegetables could thrive in drought, how a family could survive foreclosure, how a community could come together around something good. The answer was always the same: attention, patience, faith, give back more than you take, listen to what is needed, stay when it is easier to run, plant when others give up, tend what others ignore, believe against all evidence that spring will follow winter, that green will follow brown, that life will find a way. It was not magic. It was not even complicated. It was just the patient, faithful, endless work of people who understood that the land gives back what you give it. That community matters. That family is worth fighting for. That some things are more valuable than money. Ray looked at his family gathered on the porch, at the dark garden beyond, at the stars wheeling overhead in their ancient patterns. He thought about his mother, about her seeds and her journals and her unwavering faith that he would come home. She had been right about everything. It had taken him 3 decades to see it, 3 decades of running and loneliness and searching for something he already had, but he saw it now, finally, clearly. Home was not a place. It was a choice, a commitment, a willingness to put down roots and stay and tend what you planted. Home was waking before dawn to water the garden. Home was teaching strangers about soil and seeds. Home was sitting with family after a long day. Home was belonging to something larger than yourself. Ray had spent 30 years homeless, even when he had an address, even when he had a job, even when he had friends. He had been homeless because he refused to belong, refused to commit, refused to put down roots. But he was home now, finally, completely. Home in a way that had nothing to do with buildings or land ownership and everything to do with choosing to stay, choosing to tend, choosing to give back more than he took. The land had given back, just like his mother said it would, not in money or miracles but in family healed and community built and purpose found. The land had given him a reason to wake up, a reason to keep going, a reason to believe that what he did mattered. And it did matter. Every seed planted, every student taught, every neighbor helped, every harvest shared. It all mattered, not because it was dramatic or world-changing, but because it was faithful, because it was consistent, because it honored what came before and planted for what would come after. That was the real harvest, not vegetables or money or recognition, but the quiet satisfaction of doing work that mattered, of being part of a long chain of people who tended the land and each other, of planting hope in ground that everyone else had given up on. Ray touched the photograph in his pocket one more time, his mother's face smiling up at him across the decades. "Thank you," he whispered, "for waiting, for believing, for planting seeds you never saw grow. Thank you for teaching me what matters." He tucked the photograph away and turned back to his family, to Wyatt asking questions, to Travis explaining his greenhouse plans, to Hank telling another story, to Bate organizing next week's schedule, to Emma calculating profit margins, to the life that continued, the work that endured, the family that had survived. This was the harvest, this moment, this family, this land. This choice to stay and tend and believe, not perfect, not easy, but real, authentic, worth every sacrifice. The stars turned overhead. The night deepened. The family talked and laughed and planned. And in the darkness the garden slept, gathering strength, preparing for spring, doing what gardens do. Growing, giving, remembering everything that had been planted, everything that had been tended, everything that had been loved. The land remembered, and the land gave back. Just like it always had, just like it always would. For anyone patient enough to listen, faithful enough to tend, brave enough to stay. That was the lesson. That was the legacy. That was the harvest that would continue long after Ray was gone, long after everyone now living had passed into memory. The garden would remain, the knowledge would continue, the seeds would be saved and planted and saved again, generation after generation, tending what had been given to them, giving back more than they took. That was enough, that was everything. That was home,